Yesterday we agreed the provisional terms of our exit from the European Union, set out in the draft withdrawal agreement. We also agreed the broad terms of our future relationship in an outline political declaration. President Juncker has now written to the President of the European Council to recommend that decisive progress has been made in the negotiations, and a special European Council will be called for Sunday the 25th of November. This puts us close to a Brexit deal. Mr. Speaker, what we agreed yesterday was not the final deal. It is a draft treaty. It's not. It is a draft treaty that means that we will leave the EU in a smooth and orderly way on the 29th of March 2019, and which sets the framework for a future relationship that delivers in our national interest. It takes back control of our borders, laws and money. It protects jobs, security and the integrity of the United Kingdom, and it delivers in ways that many said could simply not be done. We were told that we had a binary choice between the model of Norway or the model of Canada, that we could not have a bespoke deal. But the outline political declaration sets out an arrangement that is better for our country than both of these, a more ambitious free trade agreement than the EU has with any other country. And we were told we will be treated like any other third country on security cooperation. But the outline political declaration sets out a breadth and depth of cooperation beyond anything the EU has agreed with any other country. So let me take the House through the details. First, on the withdrawal agreement, the full legal text has now been agreed in principle. It sets out the terms on which the UK will leave the EU in 134 days' time on the 29th of March 2019. We have secured the rights of the more than 3 million EU citizens living in the UK and around 1 million UK nationals living in the EU. We have agreed a time-limited implementation period that ensures businesses only have to plan for one set of changes. We have agreed protocols to ensure Gibraltar and the sovereign base areas are covered by the withdrawal agreement. And we have agreed a fair financial settlement far lower than the figures many mentioned at the start of this process. Mr. Speaker, since the start of this process, I have been committed to ensuring that our exit from the EU deals with the issue of the border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. I believe this issue can best be solved through our future relationship with the European Union. But the withdrawal agreement sets out an insurance policy should that new relationship not be ready in time at the end of the implementation period. I do not pretend that this has been a comfortable process, or that either we or the EU are entirely happy with all of the arrangements that have been included within it. But of course this is the case. This is an arrangement that we have both said we never want to have to use. But while some people might pretend otherwise, there is no deal which delivers the Brexit the British people voted for, which does not involve this insurance policy. Not Canada plus plus plus, not Norway for now, not our own white paper. The EU will not negotiate any future partnership without it. As the House knows, the original proposal from the EU was not acceptable, as it would have meant creating a customs border down the Irish Sea and breaking up the integrity of our United Kingdom. So last month I set out for the House the 4 steps we needed to take. This is what we have now done, and it has seen the EU make a number of concessions towards our position. First, the EU proposal for a Northern Ireland-only customs solution has been dropped and replaced by a new UK-wide temporary customs arrangement that protects the integrity of our precious union. Second, we have created an option for a single time-limited extension of the implementation period as an alternative to bringing in the backstop. As I have said many times, I do not want to extend the implementation period, and I do not believe we will need to do so. This is about an insurance policy. But if it happens that at the end of 2020, our future relationship is not quite ready, the UK will be able to make a choice between the UK-wide temporary customs arrangement or a short extension of the implementation period. Third, the withdrawal agreement commits both parties to use best endeavours to ensure this insurance policy is never used. And in the unlikely event that it is needed, if we choose the backstop, the withdrawal agreement is explicit that it is temporary and that the Article 50 legal base cannot provide for a permanent relationship. And there is also a mechanism by which the backstop can be terminated. Finally, we have ensured full continued access for Northern Ireland's businesses to the whole of the UK internal market. Mr. Speaker, the Brexit talks are about acting in the national interest. And that means making what I believe to be the right choices, not the easy ones. I know there are some who have said I should simply rip up the UK's commitment to a backstop, but this would have been an entirely irresponsible course of action. It would have meant reneging on a promise made to the people of Northern Ireland during the referendum campaign and afterwards that under no circumstances would Brexit lead to a return to the borders of the past. And it would have made it impossible to deliver a withdrawal agreement. As Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, I have a responsibility to people in every part of our country, and I intend to honour that promise. Mr. Speaker, by resolving this issue, we are now able to move on to finalising the details of an ambitious future partnership. The outline political declaration we have agreed sets out the basis for these negotiations, and we will negotiate intensively ahead of the European Council to turn this into a full future framework. The declaration will end free movement once and for all. Instead, we will have our own new skills-based immigration system, based not on the country people come from, but on what they can contribute to the UK. The declaration agrees the creation of a free trade area for goods with zero tariffs, no fees, charges or quantitative restrictions across all goods sectors. No other major advanced economy has such an arrangement with the EU, and at the same time we will also be free to strike new trade deals with other partners around the world. We have also reached common ground on a close relationship on services and investment, including financial services, which go well beyond WTO commitments. The declaration ensures we will be leaving the common agricultural policy and the common fisheries policy. So we will decide how best to sustain and support our farms and our environment, and the UK will become an independent coastal state once again. We have also reached agreement on key elements of our future security partnership to keep our people safe. This includes swift and effective extradition arrangements, as well as arrangements for effective data exchange on passenger name records, DNA, fingerprints and vehicle registration data. And we've agreed a close and flexible partnership on foreign security and defence policy. Mr. Speaker, when I first became Prime Minister in 2016, there was no ready-made blueprint for Brexit. Many people said it could simply not be done. I've never accepted that. I've been committed day and night to delivering on the result of the referendum and ensuring the UK leaves the EU absolutely and on time. But I also said at the very start that withdrawing from EU membership after 40 years and establishing a wholly new relationship that will endure for decades to come would be complex and require hard work. I know it's been a frustrating process. It has forced us to confront some very difficult issues. But a good Brexit, a Brexit which is in the national interest, is possible. We have persevered and have made a decisive breakthrough. Once a final deal is agreed, I will bring it to Parliament, and I will ask MPs to consider the national interest and give it their backing. Voting against a deal would take us all back to square one. It would mean more uncertainty, more division, and a failure to deliver on the decision of the British people that we should leave the EU. If we get behind a deal, we can bring our country back together and seize the opportunities that lie ahead. And, Mr. Speaker, the British people want us to get this done and to get on with addressing the other issues they care about. Creating more good jobs in every part of the UK, doing more to help families with the cost of living, helping our NHS to provide first-class care and our schools to give every child a great start in life, and focusing every ounce of our energy on building a brighter future for our country. So, Mr. Speaker, the choice is clear. We can choose to leave with no deal. We can risk no Brexit at all. Or we can choose... Or we can choose to unite and support the best deal that can be negotiated. This deal, a deal that ends free movement, takes back control of our borders, laws and money, delivers a free trade area for goods with zero tariffs, leaves the common agricultural policy and the common fisheries policy, delivers an independent foreign and defence policy, while retaining the continued security cooperation to keep our people safe, maintains shared commitments to high standards, protects jobs, honours the integrity of our United Kingdom, and delivers the Brexit the British people voted for. I choose to deliver for the British people. I choose to do what is in our national interest, and I commend this statement to the House.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the Prime Minister for an advance copy of her statement. The withdrawal agreement and the outline political declaration represent a huge and damaging failure. After 2 years of bungled negotiations, the government has produced a botched deal that breaches the Prime Minister's own red lines and does not meet our 6 tests. The government, Mr. Speaker, is in chaos. Their deal risks leaving the country in an indefinite halfway house without a real say. When even the last Brexit secretary, who theoretically at least negotiated the deal, says, "I cannot support the proposed deal," what faith does that give anyone else in this place or in this country? The government simply cannot put to Parliament this half-baked deal that both the Brexit Secretary and his predecessor have rejected. No deal is not a real option, and the government has not seriously prepared for it. The government must publish its full legal advice and the Treasury a full economic impact assessment of the deal, and the OBR an updated economic forecast. The withdrawal agreement is a leap in the dark, an ill-defined deal by a never-defined date. There is no mention of the Prime Minister's favoured term, implementation period, anywhere in the 585 pages of this document. And no wonder. There is precious little new to implement spelt out in either the agreement or the political declaration. Article 3 of the agreement states transition can be extended to end by 31st of December 20XX. Can the Prime Minister confirm that this permits extensions to be rolled on until 2099? Can the Prime Minister confirm that if the UK government cannot agree a comprehensive future relationship by January 2021, which few believe would be possible, and the last 2 years gives us no confidence this government can, then those negotiations would have to be put on hold. Because the focus would then inevitably shift from negotiations on the future relationship to the negotiations on an extension of the transition period, including further payments to the EU. Article 132 sets out this process fairly clearly. So can the Prime Minister firstly tell the House how confident she is that a deal can be done by the end of 2020, and also confirm that if a new trade agreement is not agreed by the 31st December 2020, then Article 132 applies, paying a huge financial contribution in order to extend the transition period, if we are to avoid triggering the backstop, as the Prime Minister insists is her position. On the backstop itself, should it come into force, there is no time limit or end point, and if either party requests a review, and if there is no agreement, it goes to independent arbitration. The backstop locks Britain into a deal from which it cannot leave without the agreement of the EU. In the backstop, Restrictions on state aid are hardwired in with an arbitration mechanism, but no such guarantee exists for workers' rights. Can the Prime Minister also confirm that the backstop applies separate regulatory rules to Northern Ireland, creating a de facto border down the Irish Sea, as Northern Ireland would be subject to the customs union, but not the rest of the UK? This is despite the fact that the current Prime Minister said this is something, and I quote, no UK Prime Minister could ever agree to. Another of her red lines breached. In fact, the list of EU measures that continue to apply to, quote, to the UK in respect of Northern Ireland runs to 68 pages of the agreement. This affects VAT declarations and rules of origin checks. And it's clear the Prime Minister's red line regarding the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice has also been torn up. By 2021, under the Prime Minister's plan, we will either be in a backstop or still in transition, where we'll continue to contribute to the EU budget and follow the rules overseen by the ECJ. It is utterly far-fetched for the Prime Minister to say this plan means we take control over our laws, money and borders. After 2 years of negotiation, all the government has really agreed is a vague 7-page outline of political declarations, which looks like a substantial dilution of the Prime Minister's previously declared negotiating priorities. There is only the scantiest mention of workers' rights, consumers' rights, or environmental protection. No determination to achieve frictionless trade, or even trade as frictionless as possible. No ambition to negotiate a new comprehensive customs union that would protect trade, jobs and industry. And so uncertainty continues for business and all those that work in those businesses. That risks decisions for investment being deferred even further, costing jobs and living standards, and many companies may decide the lack of certainty simply means they will Brexit. No clear plan to get a strong deal with the single market to ensure continued access to European markets in services, merely a vague commitment to go beyond the baseline of the World Trade Organization. Both the First Ministers of Wales and Scotland made clear to the Prime Minister that participation in a customs union to protect the economy and jobs was essential. Likewise, Mr. Speaker, there is no ambition to achieve continuation of the European-wide arrest warrant or an equivalent, and no clarity about our status with Europol, Eurojust or even the Galileo project. And there is no clarity about any future immigration system between the UK and the EU. And following the Windrush scandal, many EU nationals here will have no confidence at all in this government to deliver a fair and efficient system. The Brexit Secretary promised a substantive document. He's obviously no longer here. So can the Prime Minister inform the House when that detailed framework agreement will be with us? Mr. Speaker, this is not the deal the country was promised, and Parliament cannot, and I believe will not, accept a false choice between this bad deal and no deal. People around the country will be feeling anxious this morning about the industries they work in, the jobs they hold, about the stability of their communities and their country. The government must now withdraw this half-baked deal, which is clear does not have the backing of the Cabinet, this Parliament or the country as a whole.
Minister!
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, to pick up some of the points that the right honourable gentleman made. First of all, he comments on, he said that no deal was not an option, but then complained that we weren't preparing for no deal. Actually, we have been preparing for no deal, and we continue to prepare for no deal because I recognise that obviously we have a further stage of negotiation with the European Council, and then that deal, when finalised with the European Council, has to come back to this House. So we will continue those preparations. He says that the withdrawal agreement is ill-defined. 500 pages of detailed legal text on the withdrawal agreement is not an ill-defined withdrawal agreement. He complains that the withdrawal agreement does not refer to the implementation period. Of course, it does refer to the transition period, which is exactly the same point of time. He then talked about the whole question of the decision on the backstop and the implementation period as coming at the end of December 2020. Well, if he looks again at the documents that have been produced, he will see that actually the decision will be taken in June 2020 as to whether it is likely that the future relationship will not be in place on the 1st of January 2021, and a decision at that point will be for the UK to decide whether it wishes to extend the implementation period for a limited period or whether it wishes to go into the backstop. He is wrong in saying we have been absolutely he is wrong in saying that we will have not dealt with the issue of the borders and the Irish Sea. We have dealt with that. I was clear in this House that we would. It took some considerable time to persuade the European Union to move from its proposal for a Northern Ireland-only customs territory to an UK-wide customs territory, but we have achieved that. In relation to the question of workers' rights, there is reference to non-regression in relation to workers' rights. He says that the protocol, that the outline political declaration does not have references to what we were proposing in terms of a free trade area for the future. In fact, that is explicitly what it does reference in the protocol. It sets out very clearly that we will be creating a free trade area between the United Kingdom and the European Union. And then I'm really not sure what document the right honourable gentleman read, because he said there wasn't references to extradition. There are indeed references to extradition, and he said there was nothing about Europol, whereas there is expressly a reference that we will be including in the future document terms for the United Kingdom's cooperation via Europol and Eurojust. And I say to the right honourable gentleman, there is indeed a choice before members of this House. It is a choice of whether or not we go ahead with a deal that does deliver on the vote, while protecting jobs, while protecting our security, and while protecting our union. Of course, what the right honourable gentleman wants is for us to stay in the single market and stay in the customs union, which would not deliver on the vote of the referendum. We are delivering an end to free movement, coming out of the Common Agricultural Policy, out of the CFP, and taking back control of our money, borders and our laws. That is the right deal for Britain, and it is the deal that we will be putting forward before this House.
Mr Kenneth Clark.
Mr Speaker, it's always been a Brexiteer illusion that the country can leave the treaties, the European Union treaties, while selecting to retain all the benefits that we enjoy under the treaties and repudiating most, if not all, of the obligations. And we have to face up to that fact. That's an illusion. Does my right honourable friend the Prime Minister agree that the biggest single economic benefit, in fact most of the main economic benefits that we've enjoyed from our membership over the last decades, flow from the completely open border between the whole of the United Kingdom and the rest of the European Union, and that upon that have been based huge flows of inward investment, the creation of just-in-time lines of supply, and very many thousands of jobs in this country. So will she undertake that we will not change the present basis of that, which is the single market and the customs union, until we know what we're changing to, and until we're satisfied that any change will retain those benefits and keep completely open from any delays and costs caused by regulatory differences or anything else which will be created by moving away from where we are now and threaten the economic future of this country very considerably if we just decide unilaterally to walk out, as some of my colleagues seem prepared to recommend.
Prime Minister.
To my right honourable learned friend, we have indeed heard from business a very clear message about the importance of frictionless borders, which is precisely why the proposal that the United Kingdom has put forward to the European Union is based on that concept of frictionless borders. And the free trade area that we have put forward is precisely in that frame. My right honourable and learned friend talks about remaining in the single market and the customs union. I do not believe that is right for the future of the United Kingdom, because I do not believe that doing those things would deliver on the vote of the British people. I think the British people wanted, there are various things that underpinned the vote. An end to free movement was crucial among those. Also, remaining in the customs union does not enable us to have an independent trade policy. I believe it's important that we do have an independent trade policy once we have left the European Union. We're negotiating the basis of our future trading relationship, but it's based on the concept of a free trade area and precisely the point he makes about being able to move goods seamlessly across the border.
Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Prime Minister for advance sight of her statement. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister comes before us today trying to sell us a deal that is already dead in the water. Not even her own Brexit Secretary could stand over it. Now, Mr. Speaker, to lose one Brexit Secretary is one thing. To lose two in a matter of months illuminates the chaotic nature of this Tory government. The number 10 front door has become a revolving one. You know, the Prime Minister talks about taking back control. She can't even control her own cabinet. As I said yesterday, the Prime Minister is desperate and is increasingly looking defeated. What is absolutely shocking is that Scotland is not once mentioned in the document. Not once, Prime Minister, not once has the unique characteristics of Scotland's devolved settlement been worthy of mention.
Order. The leader of the Scottish National Party must be heard, and heard with courtesy. And indeed, we're very grateful for your sedentary observations, Mr. Graham, but I don't think they greatly add to the quality of our deliberations. Everybody will be heard. Mr. Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Not once has Scotland's unique characteristics in the devolved settlement been worthy of mention, and yet 100 mentions of Northern Ireland, mentions of Gibraltar, of Cyprus, of the Isle of Man, but no reference to Scotland. Utter contempt has once again been shown to the Scottish Government, its Parliament and its people. Mr. Speaker, differentiated deals for Northern Ireland means Scotland can have its own differentiated deal. If Northern Ireland can stay in the single market, why not Scotland, Prime Minister? The Scottish Government have published compromise documents calling for justice. The Scottish Parliament has affirmed that position. Why does the Prime Minister ignore the democratically expressed position of the Scottish Government? What has happened to the claim of a partnership of equals?
Never happened.
Why are the desires of Scotland being ignored when we know that a differentiated settlement can be delivered? Why does the Prime Minister stand in the face of the legitimate demands of the Scottish Government and the Scottish Parliament? Well, you know, the Prime Minister can shake her head, but it's a matter of fact, it's a matter of reality. Show some respect to the devolved institutions. The price... Well, you can bay and you can shout and you can talk about it being dreadful, but why was the Scottish Government not consulted, just as Gibraltar was, before the Prime Minister went to Cabinet yesterday? Mr. Speaker, the price Scotland would be forced to pay is far too high, with lost jobs, household income slashed and our NHS under threat. Now is the time to get realistic and put sensible options back on the table, such as remaining in the single market. Mr. Speaker, the only credible compromise for which the SNP has consistently made the case for. This deal is dead in the water. It is now clear that there is not a majority for this deal or a no deal. The Prime Minister must go back to Brussels and extend Article 50 and tell Brussels that we must remain in the single market and the customs union. Anything else, Mr. Speaker, will lead to economic chaos and crisis. Prime Minister, do the right thing and we will work with you. Stop the clock and go back to Brussels.
The Prime Minister.
Can I just pick up two key points that the right honourable gentleman made? First of all, he made a reference to Scotland's NHS being under threat. In fact, Scotland's NHS depends on the Scottish Government, the SNP government, determining the money. It's no good him pointing. He's no good him pointing his finger at me. We ensure that in the NHS settlement, the Barnetized settlement means more money comes to Scotland, and Scotland has chosen not to spend it all on their NHS. That's an SNP decision. Just to...
Order. I protected the right honourable gentleman quite properly a moment ago when he was being brayed at in an unseemly manner. But having asked the question, let me say to members of the Scottish National Party, they must hear the Prime Minister's reply with courtesy. Don't worry, everybody will get a chance. But the Prime Minister's responses must be heard with a basic courtesy and respect. The Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was then going to pick up the points that he made in relation to Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland is not staying in the single market. What is within the documents is that in order to ensure the frictionless trade across the border between Northern Ireland and Ireland, Northern Ireland will be meeting those regulations specifically in the goods part of the acquis, but it is not staying as a member of the single market. And he talks about Scotland being given the same treatment as Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland has a very particular set of circumstances. It is the only part of the United Kingdom that will have a land border with a country that is continuing as a member of the European Union. And that is why, together with our commitments in the Belfast Agreement, that is why Northern Ireland is dealt with separately in the withdrawal agreement. And then finally, he complained, much of his statement was a complaint that Scotland was not specifically mentioned in these documents. Scotland is not specifically mentioned. Scotland is a part of the United Kingdom.
Mr. Ian Duncan Smith.
Can I say that I have always wished well to my right honourable friend, and my question is in this light. To say to her, I have deep, deep misgivings on reading much of this overnight, that there is a real issue with the way that we will be treated with the backstop. And I say to her that when you read this, you realise that we are locking ourselves in to an arrangement from which we seem unable, therefore, to have the sovereign right to withdraw. That seems to me to be the biggest single issue here, which strips away the one thing that we said when we wanted to vote for leaving, was that we took back control. So can I say to my right honourable friend, my concern is that we have the sovereign right when we want to leave the UN. We have the sovereign right when we want to leave NATO. We have even the sovereign right when we want to leave the EU. But we do not have the sovereign right to leave this arrangement.
Prime Minister.
I thank my right honourable friend for his, and he says that the references to the backstop do raise some difficult issues, and I fully accept that they raise some difficult issues, and I fully accept that across the House there are concerns in relation to the backstop. Indeed, I share some of those concerns. These have not been easy decisions to take. It has been necessary, as I explained, and it would be necessary in any deal that we were striking for our future partnership with the European Union to agree a withdrawal agreement, and it has been clear, and we wanted to commit to ensure that we delivered no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. It has been clear that that withdrawal agreement needed to include this insurance policy. But if I may say to my right honourable friend, first of all, he talks about being held in the backstop. First of all, the backstop is not necessarily what will happen, because we want to ensure that the future relationship is in place before the backstop is necessary. Secondly, it will be a choice as to whether we were to go in that circumstance where there was an interim period needed before the future relationship came into place. We would be able to choose a preference between the backstop and the extension of the implementation period. There are pros and cons on both of those sides of the arguments, and there will be honourable members who have a belief that one is better than the other. There is a mechanism for coming out of the backstop if the backstop is in place, coming out of the protocol. That is a mechanism that does, and he's right, it does require mutual consent. It is for both sides to agree that. It is, and I won't make any, I won't make any bones about that, but it does enable that backstop to be replaced in a number of circumstances. Firstly, of course, crucially, if the future relationship supersedes it. It used to be the case, it was the case originally that was the only point at which it could be superseded. It is now the case that alternative arrangements could replace it. But I repeat what I have always said, which is that it is my intention to work to ensure that such an arrangement is not necessary and we are able to go into our future relationship when we come out of the implementation period.
Sir Vincent Cable.
The Prime Minister rightly asserts that there are two alternatives to her plan, no deal and no Brexit. The government is investing considerably in contingency planning for no deal. What contingency planning is she doing for no Brexit, including, for example, advising the Commission that Article 50 may have to be withdrawn, and she herself preparing for the fact, however much she hates it, that the House may instruct her to carry out a people's vote?
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman, he asked me what plans we're making for no Brexit. We are making no plans for no Brexit, because this government is going to deliver on the vote of the British people.
John Redwood.
If we took the best part of £39 billion over the next couple of years and spent it on public services and tax cuts, wouldn't that be a wonderful boost to our economy and the public mood? And wouldn't that be a better way of spending the money than buying 21 months?
Order, order. This is extremely discourteous. The right honourable gentleman has a right to be heard without being shouted down while he's speaking. I invite the right honourable gentleman to begin his question again and to deliver it in full. Mr. John Redwood.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I was saying, wouldn't it be a wonderful boost to our economy and our public services if we spent that money on ourselves rather than on 21 months of delay, massive business uncertainty, and something which would sour the political and the public mood for the whole time period?
Prime Minister.
I say to my right honourable friend, as I said at a very early stage of these negotiations, the United Kingdom is a country which meets its legal obligations. That says a great deal about the sort of country that we are. And there are legal obligations. As I said in my statement, that sum of money that he's referred to is considerably less than the European Union was originally proposing we would be required to pay as part of the financial settlement. But I remain firmly of the view that this is a country that should ensure that we continue to meet our legal obligations, and we will do so.
Mr. Nigel Dodds.
Mr. Speaker, I could today stand here and take the Prime Minister through the list of promises and pledges that she made to this House and to us privately about the future of Northern Ireland in the future relationship with the EU. But I fear it would be a waste of time, since she clearly doesn't listen. And can I say today that this House now has a clear choice, and every member in it, that this House has been left in a position where the choice is subjection to the rules and laws of others who may not have our interests at heart. And for Northern Ireland and for our precious Union, 5 of those who resigned today have all talked about the threat to the integrity of the Union, and I congratulate them and praise them for what they have said and done and their strong actions. And 39 billion has just been said for nothing. The choice is now clear. We stand up for the United Kingdom, the whole of the United Kingdom, the integrity of the United Kingdom, or we vote for a vassal state with the breakup of the United Kingdom. That's the choice.
Prime Minister.
Can I say to Can I say I will respond to the right honourable gentleman. And he is right. He and I have had many discussions on this issue, and I hope that we will continue to be able to have many discussions on this issue. We have been ensuring throughout the negotiations that the issue of the border in Northern Ireland has been one of the key issues that we have been addressing. He refers to the commitments I made in terms of Northern Ireland and the future relationship. Those commitments remain absolutely. We are looking to ensure that we have that frictionless trade across borders, that both will enable not only us to deliver on our commitment for Northern Ireland, but will also enable us to ensure that we have that frictionless trade between the United Kingdom and the European Union, as the whole of the rest of the European Union as well. I believe that, there are many aspects of the deal that we have agreed that actually ensure that we are preserving the integrity of the United Kingdom. There has been a significant focus on the question of the backstop. As I say, the backstop isn't something which neither side, neither the United Kingdom nor the European Union, wish to ever see being exercised. There are, and indeed in the circumstances, as I've said, where there needs to be a period before the future relationship is introduced, there are alternative routes that can be taken. But if the right honourable gentleman says to me that he's concerned that we have not considered Northern Ireland throughout this process, I'm grateful to him that he says he's not said that, because I have remained committed to delivering on two things for Northern Ireland: both no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland, three things: no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland, for us to be able to continue to maintain and respond to our obligations under the Belfast Agreement, and to ensure that we protect the integrity of the United Kingdom.
Anna Soubry.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, nobody can doubt the Prime Minister's absolute commitment and dedication to doing her duty and trying to deliver on the result of the EU referendum. But the harsh, cruel truth of it is that this is not the promised deal. The reason why the people of this country are so fed up is because they've been made so many promises, none of which have been delivered upon, because they can't be delivered upon. I agree with the Prime Minister. We face three choices. We either accept this agreement, and I respectfully suggest there is now no majority for it, or we have no deal, which would be profoundly irresponsible and catastrophic for our country, or we have no Brexit. We remain in the European Union, the best deal that we have with the European Union. And on that basis, would she at least today undertake not to rule out taking this back to the British people and having a people's vote?
Prime Minister.
I'm afraid on that particular issue I will disappoint my right honourable friend. I'm not going to change the position I've taken in this House, and indeed taken more widely. I believe that it is the duty of members of this Parliament to ensure that we deliver on the choice that was made by the British people, a choice that this Parliament overwhelmingly decided to give them. That means that we will not be taking the option that she said of remaining in the European Union, but we will indeed be leaving the European Union, and that will happen on the 29th of March next year.
Ms. Hilary Benn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister has once again told the House that we will be leaving the customs union. But the truth is that we will be remaining in a customs union, both in the transition and in the backstop arrangement, which can only be ended with the agreement of the EU. And the truth is also that the only way to protect jobs, investment and an open border in Northern Ireland in the long term is to remain within it. Will the Prime Minister now look the British people in the eye and admit that remaining in a customs union is in our national economic interests, because without it, we will be poorer as a country?
What is in our national interest is ensuring that we continue to have a good trading partnership with the European Union once we have left. That is why we have put forward a proposal which is reflected in the outline political declaration for a free trade area in goods. It is why we have also put forward a proposal which would ensure the frictionless trade of goods across the border. The right honourable gentleman and I disagree. A customs union is not the only way to ensure that we continue to have a good trading relationship with the European Union. We've put forward a proposal that is reflected in the outline political declaration to do that while also ensuring that we are able to take the advantage of operating an independent trade policy.
Sir William Cash.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. These 585 pages are a testament to broken promises, failed negotiations and abject capitulation to the EU. Will my right honourable friend understand that they represent a list of failures on Northern Ireland, ECJ issues, indefinite extension of time, customs, full independence of trade and of fisheries, and above all, on our truly leaving the EU, because they will control our laws, and there have been furthermore some very serious breaches of ministerial responsibilities, the ministerial code and of collective responsibility.
Minister.
Can I say to my honourable friend that what we are looking at here is a withdrawal agreement which determines the withdrawal of the United Kingdom from the European Union, and the declaration which identifies the scope and structure of our future relationship. Our future relationship is one that will not see the European Union controlling our laws, because there will be, in those areas where we choose to align with the European Union, it will be for this Parliament to decide that, and that will be a decision that will therefore be taken here by the United Kingdom. There will not be European Court of Justice jurisdiction in the United Kingdom, and that is what we have negotiated in the outline political declaration for our future relationship. But I recognise my honourable friend as one of the members of this House who has campaigned on this issue probably since the day, maybe even since before he came into this House, and has continued to campaign on this issue with a passion. And I recognise the concerns that he has expressed. As Prime Minister and as a government, it is our duty to ensure that we put together a deal that both respects the vote of the British people, and it does in the ways that I have said, and it ends free movement also, but does so in a way that protects jobs. That is why I believe it's important not only that we take back control in the areas mentioned, but that we maintain a good trading relationship with the European Union, as well as having good trading relationships elsewhere. That's in our economic interest, it's in our national interest, and that's what we will deliver.
Yvette Cooper.
The political declaration includes the passenger name records and the PRUM fingerprint database, but makes no reference to the crucial SIS2 criminal database, which we check 500 million times a year, or to a replica European arrest warrant, at a time when cross-border crime and security threats are at their highest ever level. The Prime Minister knows that these measures save lives, stop criminals and stop terrorists. So how can she, of all people, say, with her head and her heart, that this public safety downgrade is in the national interest?
Yeah. Prime Minister.
The Right Honourable Lady. First of all, of course, there is reference to us agreeing expeditious, swift and effective arrangements to enable the United Kingdom and member states to extradite suspected and convicted persons effectively and expeditiously. That will be a part of exactly the measure, the instrument that is used for that will be part of the further negotiations that will take place. She's right, SIS2 is important to us. There are two further areas of exchange of information which I and the Home Secretary believe are important, SIS2 and ECRIS. And those will be matters that we will be taking forward with the European Union in our further negotiations.
Justine Greening.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I greatly respect the Prime Minister's efforts in seeking to achieve an agreement. I don't believe this is a good deal for Britain's long-term future, and she recognises she's had to make unpalatable choices. There are clearly three choices ahead of our country in reality now, and they are crucial choices, especially for young people who will have to live with those choices for the longest. The Prime Minister said this is in the national interest. So why not allow people in our nation to have their say now? If it was good enough before, why isn't it good enough now?
Prime Minister.
can I say to my right honourable friend, and indeed, obviously, this is our right honourable friend had already raised this issue, as have members on the opposite benches. This House chose to ask the people of the United Kingdom whether they wish to remain in the European Union or leave the European Union. There was an overwhelming vote in Parliament to do that. There was an overwhelming vote in Parliament to do that. It was about 6 to 1, so anybody says it wasn't overwhelming is wrong. The British people exercised their vote. They exercised their vote in numbers that we have never seen before. The result of that vote was that we should leave the European Union. And it has always been my view, as I've seen in other European issues, other countries, other member states of the European Union, taking matters back to their populace, having a referendum, the vote has come out against what the European Union wanted, and effectively there's then been a second vote, a sort of go back and think again vote. I don't think it's right that we should do that in this country. We gave people the choice. We should deliver on the decision they took.
And Mr. Christopher Leslie.
It's quite clear we've been going for about an hour now. Not a single honourable or right honourable member has supported the plans that the Prime Minister has set out. So it's quite clear she cannot command the House of Commons on these proposals. In fact, I'm almost tempted to ask if honourable members opposite would put their hands up if they actually do support the Prime Minister on this set of proposals. Not one. Not one. In which case, she says that remaining in the European Union is an option. How can the British people fulfil that choice if that is what they choose?
Prime Minister.
I think, sorry, I apologise, but I didn't quite hear the question. I think the right honourable gentleman said staying in the European Union was an option. But no, I said there was a risk of no Brexit at all. I said there was a risk of no Brexit at all. But what the government is determined to do is to deliver on the vote that the British people took to leave the European Union.
Mr. Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My right honourable friend, and she is unquestionably honourable, said that we would leave the customs union. Annex 2 says otherwise. My right honourable friend said that she would maintain the integrity of the United Kingdom. A whole protocol says otherwise. My right honourable friend said that we would be out of the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice. Article 174 says otherwise. As what my right honourable friend says and what my right honourable friend does no longer match, should I not write to my right honourable friend, the member for Altrincham and Sale West?
Prime Minister.
Can I say to my honourable friend, can I say to my honourable friend, we will indeed, he has referred to the articles that relate to the protocol in the withdrawal agreement. I have been absolutely clear that some difficult choices have had to be made in relation to that protocol. Those choices have been made because I believe, and I strongly and firmly believe, it is important that we do ensure that there is no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. But as I have said before, my honourable friend has heard me say before, it is not only our intention, but we will be working to ensure that that protocol does not need to be put into place. What we are negotiating alongside that withdrawal agreement is not something that will be of a temporary nature, but what will be a lasting future relationship with the European Union, which will last for decades to come. And in that future relationship, we will no longer be a member of the customs union. We will no longer be a member of the single market. An end to free movement will have been delivered. The integrity of the United Kingdom will have been maintained. The jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice in the United Kingdom will end. and we will come out of the common agricultural policy and the common fisheries policy. As I ask my honourable friend to consider the nature of the future relationship that we will be delivering with the European Union, which does indeed deliver on the commitments that I've made.
Mr. Jonathan Edwards.
Mr. Speaker, with Northern Ireland potentially swimming in the deep end of the pool, can she confirm that, based on the British government's own logic, no economic border between Wales and England would arise should my country decide to front crawl down to them?
Prime Minister.
Can I say to the honourable gentleman that, of course, we're conscious, as we look at the proposals for the trading relationship between the United Kingdom and the European Union, I'm conscious of the significant trade that takes place between Ireland and Wales, and the importance this has for the Welsh ports. Of course, if you look at the future relationship, we have made a proposal for that frictionless trade, which would indeed protect the business of the Welsh ports and ensure that we have, as part of that good trading relationship for the future.
Sir Peter Bottomley.
Can I put to our right honourable friend that the majority in the country, in this Parliament and in this party accept the result of the referendum, that we back her in trying to get the sovereignty she's argued for, the prospects of prosperity, security and a fruitful partnership across the Channel, the North Sea and across the world. And the alternatives, if we don't go forward with this, are the probability of crashing out and the possibility of a government led by the Leader of the Opposition, neither of which is an alternative.
Prime Minister.
My honourable friend, I believe, as I think he does, that it is important for us to move forward, not only in delivering on the vote, but ensuring we do so in a way that does protect our prosperity, protects people's jobs and livelihoods for the future. But more than that, there are significant opportunities for this country, and once we leave the European Union, to develop that brighter future with those further trading relationships around the rest of the world, but also keeping a good trading relationship with our closest partners in the EU.
Angela Eagle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the Prime Minister now recognise that she made a catastrophic error when she decided to kowtow to the fantasy extremist beliefs of the Brexiteers in her own party, instead of bringing the country together, that their views are impossible to actually bring about, and they are now openly plotting against her as she has tried to do her best in this negotiation? Surely she now needs to listen to the fact that there is no majority in this House for the botched deal she has brought back. Think again and see whether in this House there can be a consensual way forwards which leaves her Brextremists out in the cold where they belong.
Prime Minister.
I say to the honourable lady that I have kowtowed to no one. The instruction I take is the instruction that was given to every member of this House by the British people in the referendum on 2016.
Mr. Mark Francois.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It may surprise the House, but I agree with my honourable friend from Broxton. Prime Minister, the whole House accepts that you have done your best. But the Labour Party have made plain today that they will vote against this deal. The SNP will vote against it. The Liberals will vote against it. The DUP will vote against it. Our key ally in this place will vote against it. Over 80 Tory backbenchers, well, it's 84 now and it's going up by the hour, will vote against it. It is therefore mathematically impossible to get this deal through the House of Commons. The stark reality, Prime Minister, is that it was dead on arrival at St Tommy's before you stood up. So I plead with you to accept the political reality of the situation you now face.
Sorry, the Prime Minister.
I say to the Can I say to the honourable gentleman, I respect the fact that he obviously holds very clear views on the issue of our membership of the European Union and the sort of relationship that we should have with the European Union thereafter. We will go forward with the final negotiations towards that European Council meeting on the 25th of November. And when a deal is brought back, it will be for members of this House, not just to look at the details of that deal, but to consider the vote of the British people, to consider our duty to deliver on the vote of the British people. This is the deal that has been negotiated with the European Union. We have to finalise it, and the vote will come when we have a meaningful vote. And it will be to members of this House to determine how they wish to vote at that time, and to remember when they cast their vote the importance of ensuring that we deliver on the vote of the British people.
Ben Bradshaw.
The Prime Minister will be aware that the main financial backer of Brexit, Mr Aaron Banks, is now under criminal investigation by the National Crime Agency because of serious doubts about the true source of the money he spent on the Leave campaign. Did the Prime Minister, when she was Home Secretary in 2016, decline a request from the security services for Mr Banks to be investigated?
Prime Minister.
I say to the right honourable gentleman that, of course, we do not comment in this House on individual criminal investigations that take place.
Nicky Morgan.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr Speaker. There are many ironies in this whole Brexit process, and one of them is we just heard that colleagues on these benches are going to use a parliamentary vote, which 11 of us voted for last December, and received a torrent of abuse, accusations of treachery, betrayal, and threats of deselection. But as we've heard so many times, we are where we are. I want to pay tribute to the fact that the Prime Minister did get agreement in Cabinet. And can she reassure us that regardless of however many ministerial resignations there are between now and that vote, that the agreement will come to Parliament and Parliament will have its say, and that she is clear that voting for that agreement is in the national interest?
Can I say to my right honourable friend that I can give her the assurance that obviously we have the step of the European Union Council and finalising the deal, but a deal when finalised will indeed be brought to Parliament, and as I suggested earlier, it will be for every member of this House to determine their vote in the national interest.
Pat McFadden.
Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister has carried out her mission on this with no small sense of duty, but it has been a failure and it has turned out to be a humiliation. This was sold to the people as taking back control, but the promises of the right-wing nationalists who drove this have been shown to have turned to dust. Instead, we are being asked to sign up to control of vast swathes of our economy with no say over them and paying tens of billions for the privilege. Is it not the case that, far from taking back control, this is the biggest voluntary surrender of sovereignty in living memory, and it's time to think again?
Prime Minister. My answer to his question is no. And if we look at the situation, he refers to the 39 billion, which of course was the financial settlement that is in the withdrawal agreement, which is part of the overall package of the withdrawal agreement and the future relationship. And the future relationship that we are negotiating with the European Union is designed, and the outline political declaration makes this clear, to deliver on exactly the issues that mattered to the British people when they voted for Brexit. Of course, as I've said repeatedly many times in this House, nothing is agreed until everything is agreed.
Steve Baker.
Mr Speaker, this backstop is completely intolerable, and I feel confident that even in the unlikely event that legislation for it reaches this House, it will be ferociously opposed. Will my right honourable friend therefore accept that this deal could well be a choice by the government to have no deal imposed upon it at the last minute, and will she therefore trigger all of the implementation of no deal contingencies now?
Prime Minister.
say to my honourable friend that we, as I indicated earlier, I think in response to a previous question, we will be continuing the no-deal preparations because I'm conscious that we have further stages to go in relation to this process, the European Union Council, and of course bringing this matter back to this House. And as he has recognised, that's not just the meaningful vote, but also the legislation that then has to go through. And as I said earlier, recognising that we have that European Council and that meaningful vote to take place in this House, we will be continuing our no-deal preparations.
Stephen Gettins.
Mr. Speaker, whilst it might be tempting to watch the much vaunted Tory Brexit festival, this is deeply serious stuff. Now, the Prime Minister knows that her Treasury's own analysis means that every single one of her plans means people losing their jobs. So will she look at the plan, which means us losing the least number of jobs, which is the least damaging, and may, unlike her plan, win support across this House, and that's to remain part of the customs union and the single market?
Prime Minister.
No, we will be leaving the customs union and leaving the single market.
Amber Rudd.
Or leave, whether we sit on this side of the House or that. We know that millions of people voted for Brexit because they are anxious about their futures, about their children and about their families. Away from the Westminster bubble, we must remember to consider these vast communities when we consider the outcomes today. And we know that it is no deal that will be most damaging to them. Can I ask the Prime Minister what the response is, what the response has been from the business councils that she set up, those major employers in the country that will protect those jobs?
Prime Minister.
Can I first of all thank my right honourable friend for focusing people's sights on people outside of this chamber, because they are the people that we must consider when we are looking at our decisions in relation to this deal when it comes forward. Can I just say there have been quite a number of quotes that have come from industry about the deal and about the fact that, for example, it delivers a clear path ahead that business so desperately needs. That it brings with it some certainty, the Federation of Small Businesses, it brings with it some certainty that our small businesses have craved. Business out there has been looking for the certainty that a deal will bring. And they have also been concerned that we focused on that free trade area and on that frictionless trade across borders, which of course is exactly what this government has done.
Frank Field.
Can the Prime Minister guarantee to the House that at the end of March we will continue to have frictionless supply chains, and at the end of this process we will be in control of our borders, we will have brought back all the judicial powers that we have surrendered, and we will be free from the European Court's jurisdiction?
Can I say to,
Minister.
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman that the future relationship that we are negotiating with the European Union absolutely delivers on the points that he made about no jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice, taking back control of our borders so free movement is ended. We have also based the free trade, the concept of the free trade area on the need for that frictionless trade in goods to ensure that people whose jobs depend on those supply chains do not see those jobs go, but we're not only able to retain those jobs, but with the other trade agreements we're able to bring forward once we're outside the European Union, we can enhance the economy and create more jobs in this country.
Sir Nicholas Soames.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, may I congratulate the Prime Minister on her exceptional efforts to honour the result of the referendum and to achieve a deal with the European Union under the most difficult and demanding circumstances. And will she elaborate on the scale and breadth of the future partnerships agreed on security and defence?
Prime Minister.
I'm happy to do that for my right honourable friend. There are two areas in relation to security. One, of course, is internal security, on which I've answered a number of questions, where we intend to maintain cooperation in a number of areas where we're currently working very closely with our European partners. The other is in external security and defence. And we will have, obviously, our independent foreign policy. It will be for our decisions. But what we have negotiated and is set out in the outline political declaration is an ability ability for the United Kingdom, where it makes sense to do so, to work with our European partners on matters of security and defence, and on issues like the imposition of sanctions, where it makes sense for those sanctions actually to be Europe-wider than simply the European Union, and the UK to be part of that. We will have our independent ability to deliver on sanctions, but we will cooperate with our partners in the European Union. That is what retains our independence, but also ensures that we're able to act at all times in the best interests of the United Kingdom and the best interests of maintaining our security and defence.
Caroline Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister knows that her deal is dead. She knows that no deal would be a disaster. So we risk chaos, job losses, environmental rules torn up, the NHS in crisis. Now, that was never the will of the people. They did not vote for that. This isn't a parlour game, it's real people's real lives. And those risks can only be addressed if we put aside party politics. So I appeal to her again. Why will she not give the people of this country a vote, a people's vote, on where this country goes next?
Prime Minister.
I could refer to the Honourable Lady to answers I've given earlier, but let me repeat the answer I have given earlier, which is that this Parliament gave the people a vote. The people voted to leave, and we will deliver on the people's vote.
Sir Edward Lee.
With respect to my honourable friend for North East Somerset, I believe these issues are so complex that one should not deal with them on a personal basis. But my question is this, and will she help me in my loyalty? What if the Brexit Secretary is right? What if his resignation letter, his devastating resignation letter, is correct? That we are likely or possibly going to be locked permanently in a backstop arrangement. What if, therefore, she loses this vote in Parliament, which is very likely? Can she promise me that whatever happens to this vote, she will deliver Brexit at the end of March?
Prime Minister.
Can I say to my honourable friend, first of all, that we will be leaving the European Union on the 29th of March 2019. And that is a set date, and I am determined that we will deliver on that, whatever happens in between. In relation to this question of whether or not were we to be in the backstop, and as I've said, the backstop is not an arrangement that either side actually wants to see being operated, that it was no more than a temporary construct. There are various aspects to this. I will draw his attention to one or two of those. First of all, it is not possible under Article 50, under the legal basis of Article 50, under which this withdrawal agreement is set, for it to set a permanent relationship for the future, and that is explicitly referred to within the withdrawal agreement, that it does not establish a permanent relationship, and as I say, that's inherent in the operation of the Article 50 legal base. I would also say to my honourable friend that one of the things that we have got removed from this protocol is the idea that was there at one stage that if we'd moved on to the future relationship and the British government chose to change that future relationship, that the backstop could be reinserted. It cannot be. Once it is superseded, it cannot be revived.
Phil Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I congratulate the Prime Minister? She has proven yet again that you cannot square a wheel. Can the Prime Minister therefore say, hand on heart, whether she believes what she has negotiated is better than the deal we have now?
Prime Minister.
I firmly believe that this country's best days are ahead of us. We will get a good deal in the European Union. We will get a good deal with the European Union and take advantage of our independence outside the European Union with our trade deals around the rest of the world.
Stephen Crabb.
My own constituency, like the rest of the country, is deeply divided today. Does my right honourable friend agree that there was always going to come a really difficult moment when the theory of a perfect Brexit met the cold reality of hard choices and compromise? But does she agree with me that this is absolutely not a moment to walk away from our responsibilities to govern and provide this country with leadership at this difficult time?
Minister.
Can I say to my right honourable gentleman, yes, I do agree with him. This is a complex negotiation. This is a complex negotiation. It does require difficult choices to be made. And the challenge for all of us in this House is to make those choices not according to what we wish the world could be like, but to the reality of the world that we see, and to make those choices pragmatically in the interests of the British people.
Rachel Reeves.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister insists that this deal is in the national interest. So specifically on the economy, the agreement will ensure that we have no say in the rules in which govern how we trade. It does not include services as part of free and frictionless trade, and it offers only the illusion of future trade deals. Given all this, does the Treasury believe that we will grow more or less fast and create more or less jobs with a negotiated agreement or with our current relationship with the European Union?
Prime Minister.
Lady. She refers, of course, to the withdrawal agreement. What is important in terms of the relationship that will persist for decades between this country and the European Union is the future partnership that we negotiate with the EU. That is based, as we've said, the outline political declaration is based on the concept of a free trade area and ensuring that we can continue to have that good trade relationship. And I can assure her, as I've assured honourable members across this House before, that when the meaningful vote is before this House, members will have the appropriate analysis in order to inform them in coming to their decision.
Dr. Sarah Wollaston.
It will be blindingly obvious to the entire country that the Prime Minister's deal cannot pass this House. What they will find unforgivable is that we are running out of road, and in 134 days we will be crashing out of the European Union with no deal and no transition, with catastrophic consequences for all the communities that we represent in this House. Could I urge the Prime Minister again to think again about whether at this stage we should go back to the people, present them with the options, rather than us just stumble on regardless into something that will have such profound implications for all of our lives.
Prime Minister.
The nature of the Brexit, of our future relationship with the European Union, will be a matter, of course, that will come before this House in the vote that this House will take. And members of this House will have various issues to consider when they take that vote. But I will say to my honourable friend, as I have said to other honourable members, honourable and right honourable members of this House, that I firmly believe that having given the choice as to whether we should leave the EU to the British people, it is right and proper and indeed our duty as a Parliament and as a government to deliver on that vote.
Liz Kendall.
We now know that during the transition, which may well have to be extended, that the UK will give up our say over the rules that govern large parts of our economy. And if the backstop comes into play, we won't unilaterally be able to leave it. How is giving up our current say and influence for no say and influence taking back control?
Can I say to the Honourable Lady that indeed what she describes in relation to the transition period was clear. I've answered questions in this House on it back in March when the European Council agreed the concept of the transition period. So that was absolutely clear. The point of that transition period is moving towards the future relationship, and the future relationship is one in which we will have the ability to determine our position. Yes, we put forward a proposal in the White Paper which had frictionless trade and a common rule book, but alongside that common rule book was a parliamentary lock on determining whether or not this country would accept any changes in those rules.
Mr. Peter Bone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government is preparing to give £39 billion to the EU, and there is no legal obligation to do so, and we are going to get nothing in return. That is £60 million for each and every constituency in this country. Sir, if I had £60 million in Wellingborough, I would have the Isham bypass, I'd have our roads mended properly, I'd have an urgent care centre at the Isbrook Hospital, and would have millions of pounds over. Please, Prime Minister, use that money in this country, not give it to the EU.
Prime Minister.
My honourable friend, the premise of his question was that there was no legal obligation for us to pay anything to the European Union. I have to say that I believe that is not the case. I believe there are legal obligations for this country in relation to the financial settlement with the European Union. And as I said earlier, I believe that as a country, we are a country that abides by our legal obligations.
Tom Brake.
This deal is not in the national interest, and the Prime Minister knows that. It leaves us less secure, less influential and more isolated. But could I ask the Prime Minister, on the subject of no Brexit at all, could she set out what scenarios would lead to no Brexit at all? As far as I can tell, there are only two. One, she calls a general election, which I assume she won't be doing, or two, she allows a people's vote. So which of those two is it going to be?
Prime Minister.
To the right honourable gentleman. He refers to what he described what he thinks the position is going to be for the United Kingdom if we go ahead with this deal. And he talks about us being more isolated. That will not be the case. The United Kingdom will be continuing to play its role on the world stage in a whole variety of organisations that will be involved in, but also in the way in which we negotiate trade deals with the rest of the world, in the way in which we support and cooperate with parts of the rest of the world on matters like security and defence. There is no sense in which this United Kingdom is going to be isolated when we leave the European Union.
Antoinette Sandbach.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For many months, this House was assured that it would have the full future framework before it when it was voting on the withdrawal agreement. I was encouraged to hear the Prime Minister say that further detail will emerge, as that will be critical for the jobs and employment in my constituency. Can the Prime Minister outline when we will see that full future framework?
Can I thank my honourable friend, because this gives me an opportunity to set out the process that will be followed. We will be now entering into further intense negotiations with the European Union, such that a full future framework can be delivered to the European Council as part of the overall package, and that will then, of course, be published and available for members of this House to see. And I'm conscious that it is important, while we can't agree legal text on the future relationship, because we cannot do that until we have left the European Union, that we have sufficient detail in that future framework that members are able to have confidence in the future relationship with the European Union when they come to vote on the meaningful vote.
Mr. Barry Sherman.
Mr. Speaker, I have known Prime Minister all her parliamentary career. I don't always agree with her, but I know her to be a woman of courage. And I feel sorry for her this morning, let down by the disloyalty of so many of her colleagues. And I also feel sorry for her because we have actually given her an impossible task. We know, increasingly in this country and in this House, that there is no deal better than staying in the European Union. And it is time we did something to recognise and be courageous and take it back to the people.
The right honourable gentleman will not be surprised that the answer I give him, despite the fact that we have known each other throughout my career in this House, will be no different from that I've given to other honourable and right honourable members of this House in relation to taking the vote back to the people. It was a decision of this Parliament by 6 to 1 that the people should have that choice, and they exercised their vote, as I said earlier, in numbers that we've not seen before. And I think it is only right and proper that this Parliament, that this government delivers on that vote.
The good doctor, Dr. Julian Lewis.
Can the Prime Minister describe any surer way of frustrating the referendum result and ultimately remaining in the European Union than to accept a Hotel California Brexit deal which ensures that we can never truly leave the EU with all its manipulative, entangling and undemocratic practices?
Can I say to my honourable friend, we are leaving the European Union on the 29th of March 2019. We are negotiating a future relationship with the European Union that will indeed deliver on the vote of the British people that took place in the referendum. And we will do so because we will bring an end to free movement, an end to the jurisdiction of the Court of Justice of the European Union, come out of the Common Agricultural Policy, out of the Common Fisheries Policy. These are issues that I have referred to previously. But we will be leaving on the 29th of March 2019.
Luciana Berger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The withdrawal agreement that the Prime Minister is presenting to us today is not in the national interest, and it's very clear it is not going to make us better off. She may not be aware that there's been an overnight YouGov poll that shows that 63% of the British public are against this deal, with 64% favouring a people's vote if the deal is rejected, which is very clear from the contributions this morning is what is going to happen in this House. Will she now listen to the millions of people across our country and give them a say on what Brexit will actually mean, rather than on the false promises that the vote to leave was predicated upon?
To the Honourable Lady, that the documents actually were published yesterday evening, which 500 pages of the withdrawal agreement plus the outline political declaration and the joint statement. But once again, the assumption is that we should in some sense try to go back on the vote that the British people took. I believe absolutely that we should not, and that we should ensure that we do leave the European Union. That was the decision that was taken by the British people, and that's the decision we will deliver on.
And Dr. Philip Lee.
When I resigned from the government in June, I called for the suspension of Article 50 because I feared this likely parliamentary impasse. I know the Prime Minister is a thoroughly decent person who has public service running through her veins. With that in mind, and with an eye on the importance of the responsibility of government, could the Prime Minister outline to me the legal, the legislative and political requirements of suspending Article 50 or indeed revoking it?
Can I say, as I think my honourable friend will know, there is of course a case, has been a case before the courts on the issue of the extension of Article 50, but this government's position is clear: we will not extend Article 50.
Joanna Cherry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Prime Minister, Articles 14, 87, 89, 158 and 174 of this agreement mean that the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice will continue to reign supreme across the UK in a number of respects, for 4 years after the transition period in some respects, for 8 years after the transition period in other respects, and in the case of Northern Ireland, indefinitely. Can she tell us in what respects her red line on the Court of Justice survives this agreement?
Say to the honourable lady that yes, and I was very clear when we brought back the agreement in December in the joint report in relation to citizens' rights, for example, that there would continue to be an ability for the interpretation of the European Court of Justice in relation to European Union law on those rights to be considered for a period of time beyond the end of the transition period, and then that will cease. In relation to Northern Ireland, it is not the case that Northern Ireland will be indefinitely under the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice. The future relationship that we are negotiating with the European Union will ensure that the United Kingdom will be removed from the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice. If she looks at the governance arrangements that have been put in, that are proposed to be put in place, we are very clear that the court of one party cannot determine matters in relation to the court in relation to another party.
Sir Christopher Chope.
My right honourable friend has repeated today that nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. So can my right honourable friend explain why there is nothing in the withdrawal agreement which makes the withdrawal agreement legally contingent upon the implementation and agreement of a legal relationship for the future?
Say to my honourable friend that there are indeed, of course, clauses which link the withdrawal agreement to the future relationship. and to ensuring that both sides will be, and the legal term of best endeavours is used in a number of places in relation to this matter, to ensure that that future relationship is in place. Obviously, as I've said earlier, we are still going to be negotiating further details in relation to that future relationship. And it is the determination of both sides, as expressed in these documents, that that future relationship should be capable of being put into place at the end of the transition period.
Kate Hoey.
The Prime Minister made a very dignified statement in very difficult circumstances, but does she actually realise that outside this House, when people read these hundreds of pages of Eurospeak, that they will realise that in a way we are being sold out. We've been sold out by our negotiators who have allowed the EU to take the lead. Will she not accept that at this stage, not only are we all being collectively sold out, but the people of Northern Ireland are being sold out absolutely?
I say to the Right Honourable Lady that I do not agree with her in relation to the suggestion that in some sense the European Commission, the European Union, has given nothing away to the UK during these negotiations. These have been tough negotiations. This is a complex matter. But, for example, as I referred to in my statement, the EU has been clear for some time that the choice we had in our future relationship was binary between the Norway model or the Canada model. They have now accepted that is not the case, and there is a bespoke agreement for the United Kingdom. They said we couldn't share security capabilities. As is clear in the outline political declaration, we do have access to certain security capabilities. They said that we couldn't preserve the invisible border between Northern Ireland and Ireland without splitting the UK's customs territory. That is now no longer the case. These are all issues that our negotiators have negotiated in the interests of the United Kingdom.
Stephen Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The boost to our economy that was referred to earlier and the necessary protection for our constituents' jobs can only occur if UK industry has a frictionless trade area and deep regulatory cooperation. But UK financial services and UK industry also need certainty. So would my right honourable friend confirm to the House that the future political framework will contain a common rulebook and a deep customs arrangement?
As my honourable friend has seen from the outline political declaration, it makes reference to the free trade area that we will be negotiating with the European Union, and indeed to the need to ensure that we have those good arrangements across our border. As was outlined in the joint statement that accompanied the outline political declaration, there are two areas where, in particular, where further negotiation is continuing. One of them is on this issue in relation to the trade relationship. The other is, as I indicated in my response to the Right Honourable Lady, the Member for Pontefract, that actually there are aspects of the security relationship that we are continuing to negotiate. But we continue to work on the basis that my Right Honourable friend has set out of the importance of that frictionless trade across borders.
Mr. David Lammy.
The Right Honourable Lady has been a professional colleague for over 20 years, and I personally saw how hard she worked during the 2011 riots. This whole House recognises the dedication and hard work she has put into this 585-page agreement. However, because of her huge parliamentary experience, they also recognise that this agreement does not command a majority in this House, and that in the 10 days to follow before the EU sign off this agreement, she will likely face challenges within her own party. In those circumstances, in our constitutional arrangement, when politics is broken, one can only put the question back to the British people.
I think having had the vote in 2016, I think the British people will look at this chamber, will look at this House, will look at this Parliament, and will say what people say to me when I go on the doorsteps and talk to them: actually, we've taken the decision to leave, just get on with it, just deliver.
Dr. Caroline Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Prime Minister, you said that it will be our choice whether we go into an implementation period or a backstop if the agreement cannot be reached. But in the in this document, it says if the protocol gives the UK a choice to either implement the backstop or seek an extension of the implementation period, which it does by requesting that. So how is that our choice and not theirs?
It is our choice as to which of those we wish to do. It is absolutely right, and my honourable friend is right, that that extension of the implementation period does need to have agreement with the European Union, and that is why I have described this as a choice. It is for us to say whether we wish the backstop or the implementation period to be extended. But she's absolutely right, that extension would be a matter of negotiation with the European Union. There are arguments on both sides for, if we get to that point, as to which of those would be preferable for the United Kingdom, just as actually there will be arguments on both sides for the European Union, because the backstop is not actually an area, not a situation, which the European Union wants to get into either.
Mary Cray.
Indeed, Mr. Speaker, I have a great deal of sympathy for the Prime Minister. She has walked the Via Dolorosa that has been set out for her by her own party. But the false choice that she is offering this place is between a deal that is dead before it's even been read by most people in this House, or no deal at all. Isn't it time now for the British people to take back control from this place, for her to extend Article 50 and let the people decide in a people's vote?
I have to say to the Honourable Lady, I refer her to the answers I gave previously to those questions.
Mr. Richard Drax.
Mr. Speaker, my right honourable friend tells the House that at the end of March 19 we are going to leave the EU. We've also heard from herself and from both sides of the House that actually that is not the case. Worse about this deal, and with due respect to my right honourable friend, we have no unilateral way of leaving, and worse still, there is no incentive there at all for the EU to let us go.
Can I say to my honourable friend, we will be leaving the European Union on the 29th of March 2019. After that date, we will no longer be a member of the European Union. Yes, we have agreed in the transition period that the way we operate with the European Union will continue very much as it is today, and that is in order to ensure that there is no cliff edge for business at the point of the 29th of March, so that business can adapt to the changes that come in relation to our future relationship. That is, I repeat, we will no longer, from the 29th of March 2019, be a member of the European Union.
Mrs. Marianne Fellows.
Mr. Speaker, during the course of yesterday, and excluding her own cabinet, can the Prime Minister tell the House which organisations and individuals were informed and briefed on our proposed deal, in which order they were briefed, and what process of hierarchy was applied?
Absolutely. I say to the Honourable Lady that the members of the Cabinet came together yesterday to look at the withdrawal agreement and at the outline political declaration. The information was made available to the members of the Cabinet once the text had been finalised. Negotiations carried on up to quite a late time in relation to those negotiations, and the Cabinet was able to take its decision on the basis of the proper papers.
Sir Desmond Swain.
Why did she say that rejecting the deal risks no Brexit? Can she quantify that risk and say how it might occur?
Can I say to the honourable gentleman that I think he will be aware that there may be those in this House, as we have heard indeed from a number of honourable members on the opposition benches, who do wish to try to ensure that we do not leave the European Union. I believe it is important that we do leave the EU, and that we do so on the basis of a good future relationship with the EU.
Peter Kyle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is obvious that she is not commanding a majority in the House. People who supported Leave know that this deal gives power to the EU, not brings it back. And people who support Remain know that the deal she is offering is not as good as the one we have. We have got to this position because she has been playing games with Brexit from the beginning, including calling a general election in the middle of the negotiation period. will she now do the right thing and go back to the people and let them say if this deal is good enough for them? This is not a rerun of the referendum. The first one was based on promises. This one will be based on fact.
I refer the honourable gentleman to the answer I gave earlier.
Nick Herbert.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Is there not a danger then in getting hung up on issues such as the backstop, which, though immensely important, is something that we actually on all sides wish to avoid, or issues such as the transition period, which are by definition temporary, that in getting hung up on these issues we lose sight of the really important issue, which is the future relationship with the EU. That is what we should be focusing on and discussing, and that is what our constituents expect us to deliver. And is it not the case that the vast majority of members of this House, however they voted in the referendum, voted to trigger Article 50, and the public expect us to deliver on that promise, and members on this side in particular should be careful what they wish for in making it harder to move to that position?
Can I support the comments that my right honourable friend has made? And he is absolutely right. Of course, there's been a lot of focus on the backstop, and I recognise why there's been a lot of focus on the backstop, because there are genuine concerns about the operation of the backstop. And of course, as he says, others have referenced the transition or implementation period. But what actually will determine our relationship with the European Union for decades ahead is the future relationship that we negotiate with the European Union. That is what will determine the futures of his constituents, of my constituents, and of people across the whole United Kingdom.
Order. I take this opportunity to inform the House that we have now had 50 questions from backbenchers. So may I please appeal to colleagues to put short and pointed questions as exemplified by the right honourable gentleman, the member for New Forest West. Jack Dromey.
Mr. Speaker, no deal would have catastrophic consequences for UK manufacturing. This deal will not pass Parliament. Why does the Prime Minister persist in seeking to achieve the unachievable? Because with every day of delay, we're one step closer to the cliff. And to go over that cliff without an agreement would be the ultimate betrayal of the British national interest.
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman that when it comes to the House, of course, members of this House will have a choice as to whether to accept the deal. I understand that motor manufacturers have actually welcomed the deal. They recognise that this is a step forward in ensuring we can deliver on what matters to them for the future relationship and the future trading partnership with the EU.
Vicky Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Many of the questions put by colleagues today would be addressed if there was more detail on the future relationship. But of course it's been the EU negotiators and not the British negotiators who've refused to discuss the future relationship before the withdrawal agreement. So can I thank the Prime Minister for this outline of the future relationship, and can she clarify that we will get more detail on that future relationship before the critical vote in this House?
Yes, I'm very happy to confirm that to my honourable friend. She refers to the position of the EU negotiators. In fact, I think for many, they feel that they have been looking at perhaps more of the future relationship than they had expected. But we will ensure that there is more detail available for members of this House before the meaningful vote.
Shukar Amuna.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has said the country faces three choices: no Brexit, any agreement that she is able to finalise with the EU and get through this House, and no deal. She's also just said that we will get an economic analysis, an impact assessment. Will she undertake to ensure that that impact assessment includes a comparison between the current deal we have, no Brexit, and the one she is proposing to put before this House in a meaningful vote? To withhold that from this House would be unacceptable.
I say to the honourable gentleman that we will ensure that when the time comes for people to, indeed in advance of the time that people will be taking their decision in relation to the meaningful vote, that proper analysis will be available to enable people to make a judgment between the deal that is being proposed and between alternative arrangements.
Andrew Bridgen.
The Prime Minister is well known for her dancing. Sadly, having seen the withdrawal agreement, it's now clear whose tune she's been dancing to. My right honourable friend campaigned for Remain. She voted Remain. Now, surely it's in the national interest for her to leave, perhaps following a short transition period.
Sit down, you Get agreed.
To my honourable friend, can I note the way in which he has carefully tried to weave into his question various references to matters that are not perhaps entirely relevant to the withdrawal agreement and the political declaration. Look, every member of this House will have a decision to take when the deal is brought back. I believe it is important that we have a deal which does deliver on the vote of the British people, which I believe the deal does, but does that in a way that protects jobs, protects people's security, and of course protects the integrity of our United Kingdom.
Alison McGovern.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today is truly a sad day for our country. The government is collapsing whilst we are riddled with food banks, child poverty rises, and 30% of workers are in hardship jobs. What, in the 3 pages of wish list here, should the Prime Minister suggest that will change the fortunes of this country for the better?
Can I say to the Honourable Lady, first of all, we see that absolute poverty is, in fact, at a low. What we have seen in the figures that have come out earlier this week is that real wages have been growing faster recently than at any time in the last decade. So the portrayal that she has set out of this country is not a fair portrayal. What she says, what is going to ensure and improve the futures of the British people? Well, first of all, getting a good trade deal with the European Union is important. That's what we're working to. That's what the outline political declaration sets out. But also ensuring that we can have those good trade deals around the rest of the world. But I have to point out to her, given the benches that she sits on, that what is necessary for all of that is the good economic management that the Conservative government has produced.
Sir Geoffrey Clifton Brown.
I have no doubt that my right honourable friend has, in good faith, negotiated the best deal on this withdrawal agreement that she could. It doesn't please Brussels, it doesn't please London, and it probably doesn't please any member of this House. But nevertheless, do we not owe it to the British people to carefully scrutinise it, together with the remaining documents that she will bring back from the summit in November, to see whether it is in the best interests of the British people rather than crashing out of the EU with no deal?
Can I say to my right honourable friend, I think it is important that, as I say, there is some further negotiation to fill out the details of the future relationship, and as he says, it will be important for members of this House to consider those documents when they take the meaningful vote, alongside the analysis that will be provided by government, so that they have the full information to be able to take that vote, and as he says, recall in taking that vote the duty that I believe we have to deliver on the vote that was taken in the referendum.
Rashanara Ali.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's clear that this deal is not as good as the one we currently have. It will make the country worse off, and it's clear that there is no majority in the House for her deal or no deal. And the Prime Minister has ruled out extending Article 50 or a people's vote. So what is the plan in the event of not getting support in the House for her deal?
The Honourable Lady will know the process that has been set by this House in relation to that matter. But can I also say to her that she and a number of other members on the Labour benches have been saying today, in praising the membership of the European Union, effectively suggesting that what we should be doing is setting aside the vote of the British people and remaining in the European Union. That would not be the right thing to do. We must deliver on the vote of the British people.
Gillian Keegan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Outside in the real world, there are many employers and employees who are depending on all of us to take responsible steps to protect their jobs. Would the Prime Minister agree with Tech UK, who represent over 1 million jobs in this country in the fast-growing tech sector, who state, failing to achieve parliamentary approval on the withdrawal agreement would disrupt supply chains, hit investment and lead to job losses, with small and medium-sized businesses being the worst affected?
Can I say to my honourable friend, when the time comes for members of this House to vote in the meaningful vote and to consider the deal that is before them, they will indeed, I believe, as I've said earlier, need to recall the duty to deliver on the vote of the British people, but also look very closely at the implications for the vote that they are casting. It is the jobs and futures of our constituents that should be at the forefront of our mind.
Sir Edward Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given how important immigration was for some Leave voters, will the Prime Minister today guarantee that her immigration white paper will be published and debated before the meaningful vote on the deal?
The issue of immigration was indeed important for many people during the vote. They wanted free movement to end. What we are negotiating is an end to free movement. We will publish the immigration white paper in due course.
Peter Aldous.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister has worked tirelessly over the past 18 months to achieve this draft agreement. The Waveney constituency, which I represent, voted for Brexit for many reasons. Chief among them was to reverse 40 years of economic decline. In the Prime Minister's opinion, does this agreement provide the framework within which to revive the economy in coastal towns such as Lowestoft, whether in trade, manufacturing or fishing?
Well, can I say to my honourable friend that yes, I do believe it does. And crucially, of course, in terms of fishing, we'll be out of the CFP and we'll be able to work to enhance the fortunes of our fishing industry. But also alongside this agreement, it's important to look at what the government is doing elsewhere through our modern industrial strategy, for example, to ensure that we are delivering an economy that works for everyone in all parts of the UK.
Tracy Brabin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister has been very determined to respect the will of the people. Over 60% of my constituency in Batley and Spen voted to leave, believing they'd be taking back control. But this deal's backstop will be policed by a third party. Now, today she said it won't be used, it won't be necessary, and it will be temporary. But in order for it not to be used, we're going to have to pay who knows what, potentially massive amounts to the EU to extend the transition period. How is making my constituents and the country poorer taking back control?
I say to the honourable lady, the best way of ensuring that the backstop is not used is to get the future relationship, the future partnership with the European Union in place by the 1st of January 2021.
Mrs Cheryl Murray.
Mr. Speaker, will my right honourable friend please confirm that other nations will not have access to anything other than the surplus fish stocks in British waters that the UK fleet cannot catch after the 31st of December 2020, even if the implementation period is extended?
We have not changed our position that as of December 2020, the UK should be an independent coastal state able to negotiate the issue of access to its waters for the following year and obviously for thereafter.
Stella Creasy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister's been on her feet now for almost 2 hours. She talked about making difficult choices. She also said that this wasn't the final deal. With the pound set to have its biggest fall for 2 years and only 7 MPs in 2 hours expressing any support for this deal at all, can she tell us what she expects to change to be able to break that deadlock?
Can I say to the honourable lady that what will happen over the next few days and before the Special European Council takes place is the final negotiation in matters relating to the future relationship, to fill out the details of that future relationship, which will show a future relationship which will indeed be good for the UK economy.
Dr Andrew Murison.
Firstly, huge personal respect for the Prime Minister, wherever you stand in this matter. Can I urge my right honourable friend to study evidence given to my Select Committee this week by customs experts, and in particular their suggestions around facilitation and technical ways of achieving a soft border and one that does not require a backstop? And would she agree with me that the independent arbitration panel is bound to find that if the EU does not negotiate the future arrangement with that in mind, it is likely to be found to have acted in bad faith?
Well, indeed, and that is the point of the best endeavours and good faith references that there are within the document. I think crucial, and actually may I first say that this, I think, is the first opportunity I have in this chamber to say a heartfelt thank you to my honourable friend for the work he did for the commemorations of the armistice and the centenary of the First World War. I think he can be truly proud of all the events that took place. But he also referenced the issue of alternative arrangements for the border in Northern Ireland. One of the changes that have taken place recently that we got into the protocol, into the joint statement in relation to this backstop issue, is precisely this ability to look at alternative arrangements rather than just the binary choice of the future relationship coming into place or the backstop coming into place. We've of course got the extension of the implementation period as an option, but what is also important is that if the future framework is not in place, it is possible to have alternative arrangements for the border which satisfy the requirement we all have and the desire we all have to ensure that there's no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland.
Mike Gapes.
Mr. Speaker, at previous times in our history with national crises, we've come together on both sides of the House to resolve those crises. The Prime Minister has made clear that she will not support the extension of Article 50. She said we will be leaving the European Union regardless in March next year, and she's also ruled out a people's vote. Isn't it time she recognised reality and, after all her prodigious efforts, stood aside for someone else who could take this country forward in a united way?
No.
Adam Holloway.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Prime Minister feel she's listened to her officials while sidelining her Brexit secretaries, and is she now disobeying the instruction of my constituents in Gravesham?
I have to say to my honourable friend the answer to both of his questions is no. I have worked with Brexit secretaries and obviously with officials, with the negotiating team throughout this process, and I believe the deal that we're proposing does deliver on the instruction of the British people.
Dr. Lisa Cameron.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. As a psychologist, it's clear to me today that the Prime Minister is in denial. However pragmatically agreed this deal has been, it doesn't command a majority in this House. If she believes in her deal and she wants to give back control, will she put it to the people?
I refer the honourable lady to the answer I've given earlier on that question.
Mr. Philip Dunn.
Millions of people up and down this country and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of businesses want this House to get on with it. Could I say to my right honourable friend, as she looks to develop the future framework, I recognise that we will remain within the EU procurement rules during the course of the implementation period. The Future Framework Protocol refers to mutual opportunities to go beyond the WTO government procurement agreement. Could she give some indication to the House as to whether that will include taking back control of our own procurement in this country?
Yes, we're developing a framework for our own procurement arrangements.
Rachel Maskell.
Mr. Speaker, in the light that a no deal will be a disaster for our nation, and in the high probability that this deal will not be passed by this House, will the Prime Minister make it her first step to extend Article 50 to ensure that we don't fall off a cliff edge?
Absolutely.
No, the government has made clear that we will not be extending Article 50.
Martin Vickers.
Mr. Speaker, the draft agreement states that under no circumstances may the United Kingdom apply to its customs territory a customs tariff which is lower than the common customs tariff for any good or import from a third country. Would my right honourable friend agree that that is a severe limitation on our sovereignty and will limit the opportunities that Brexit offers?
Well, can I say to my honourable friend that what he is talking about is the circumstances in which the backstop on the UK-wide customs territory has come into place. As I've said earlier, that is not a situation that either side wants to see happen, and even in the circumstances where the future relationship is not in place at the end of December 2020, it is not necessarily the case that that backstop would come into place. If we look at the future relationship, he will see that there is a specific reference to the independent trade policy for the United Kingdom, and that is precisely what we are working to ensure, that we are able to do those trade deals around the rest of the world. And that was one of the questions we looked at when we put forward our proposals for the free trade area with the European Union, and we have gone forward confident that we will be able to do free trade deals around the rest of the world.
Chris Bryant.
I agree with the Prime Minister that there are no enemies of the people in this House. There are no traitors, whatever the national newspapers may have said last year, and every single member will make their own judgment according to their conscience as to what is in the best interests of the country. But I think the Honourable Member for Rayleigh was right earlier. There isn't a majority for what the Prime Minister is proposing in this House. There is a matter of time now. Time is of the essence. Hundreds of SIs, whichever we go after this, that have to be taken. Lots of legislation that has to be in place unless there's going to be chaos. Would it not make sense now, before she goes to the European Council, to have a vote in this House? If she wins, she's got the support of Parliament. If she loses, then we have to take another tack.
The right honourable gentleman, we will have a vote in this House. We will have a vote on in this House on the final deal that is negotiated with the European Union Council. As I said, although we have the outline political declaration at the moment, we will be filling that in with further detail, which will be available to members when they come to that vote.
Bob Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister and I know that politics ultimately is about the art of the possible. And that's why I support her deal, and that's why the City Corporation and all the representatives of the financial service industry have supported it, not least because it creates, in their words, the transition which is vital to take forward the complex issues in relation to our future relationships in that area. Does she agree that anyone who seeks to thwart this deal should weigh very carefully indeed the impact not just upon that key economic area but upon the rest of our economy as well?
Say to my honourable friend that he is absolutely right. I think when people come to look at their decision in relation to this deal, it will be important for individual members of this House to weigh very carefully a number of factors, and the impact of their decision, not only on our financial services sector but on the economy more widely, will be one of those.
Ruth Smith.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My constituency voted leave, and I promised we would fight for the best possible Brexit deal for them, one that will protect industry. This isn't it. Given ceramics is mentioned just once in the 585-page deal, how can we trust the Prime Minister to deliver a deal that will benefit my constituents, protect jobs and return sovereignty?
The deal that we have agreed, and particularly obviously the future relationship that we are working on to fill out the detail of, is precisely one that will be good for manufacturing industry across the United Kingdom.
Maggie Throop.
Taking back control of our borders was one of the big issues that my constituents voted on at the referendum and influenced their vote. Will my right honourable friend confirm that leaving the EU on the terms proposed will allow us to finally fully control our borders again?
Yes, I'm happy to give that confirmation to my honourable friend. Free movement will end. And that is one of the key elements, I believe, of the vote in the referendum that we need to ensure that we deliver for the British people.
Kevin Brennan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If the analogy for the backstop is an insurance policy, anyone buying an insurance policy would want to know what the excess is on that policy. Is she seriously suggesting we should sign up for an insurance policy where we don't know how much the excess will cost? And we also can't leave that insurance policy without the agreement of the other party.
I say to the honourable gentleman, one of the elements of the backstop, and this is where, in deciding should we be in that circumstance, whether the backstop or the extension to the implementation period would be preferable, one of the elements is that in the backstop there is no financial obligation.
Rachel McLean.
you, Mr. Speaker. It's impossible for any of us to know in this House exactly what was in our constituents' minds when they voted to leave or remain. It was a binary choice on that paper. Therefore, by that logic, it is absolutely impossible for everybody to get what they want. Certain compromises are necessary in the national interest, as the Prime Minister has said. So therefore, will she assure us today that she will exert every effort to outline the benefits of a future trade deal that will be in the national interest and will protect jobs and the economy?
Well, yes, I'm happy to give that reassurance to my honourable friend. She's absolutely right. The nature of this negotiation is that both sides make compromises. That is what happens when two sides come together to negotiate arrangements such as this. But I'm very happy to assure her that we will make clear the benefits of the future trade relationship and the future trade deals we'll do around the rest of the world.
Alistair Carmichael.
The response of the Scottish Fishermen's Federation says, and I quote, "We have asked the Prime Minister for assurances that the establishment of a new fisheries agreement does not imply that EU vessels will be guaranteed continued access to our waters in return for favourable trade terms." Can the Prime Minister give the Federation that assurance? And if she can she explain why it's not in the draft deal?
Say to the right honourable gentleman that we have made clear in the draft deal in relation to fishing opportunities that, in the outline political declaration, that the United Kingdom will be an independent coastal state and that we will be ensuring that we take control of our waters. It will be the United Kingdom that will be negotiating access to United Kingdom waters.
James Cartledge.
Given that there is clearly unease about the non-unilateral ability we have to leave the backstop, surely we have to discuss what credible circumstances could arise where we would wish to leave it and the EU would not wish us to leave. Does she agree with me? The only real scenario I could see is where we had entered into trade talks with another country where, for example, we were discussing lower standards. Does she agree that's highly unlikely, would not be supported by the public, and that therefore, although it is not impossible, it is remote that we would be in that circumstance?
Can I say to my honourable friend, I absolutely agree that it's highly unlikely we'll be in that circumstance. He's right, first of all, that we will not be wanting to lower our standards in any decisions we take in relation to trade deals, but also that the backstop is actually an uncomfortable place for the European Union. They believe that the backstop actually has advantages for businesses in the United Kingdom, particularly businesses in Northern Ireland. These are advantages they will not want to see continuing. They have an interest in this being temporary, should we be in that position, just as we do.
Sammy Wilson.
The Northern Ireland protocols make it quite clear that Northern Ireland will stay under EU single market law and will also be economically separated from the rest of the United Kingdom. Articles 7, 9 and 12 show that, first of all, even if the EU allow the UK to leave the single market, Northern Ireland will still stay under single market arrangements, and any border down the Irish Sea will be subject to the willingness of the EU to allow that to be avoided. Can the Prime Minister then tell us how she can give an assurance that Northern Ireland is not going to be constitutionally separated from the United Kingdom and economically separated from GB, or is this not a case of Northern Ireland being put on a platter and an object surrender to the EU?
No, it is not the case. I have throughout this discussion, throughout these negotiations, the interests of Northern Ireland have been one of the key issues that we have been putting at the forefront of our mind because of the particular geographical circumstances of Northern Ireland and its land border with Ireland. I say to the honourable gentleman, Northern Ireland will leave the single market with the whole of the United Kingdom. There will be specific regulatory alignment, which I recognise is uncomfortable, and I recognise that. It will be in that portion of the single market a key, which relates to matters that ensure that a frictionless border can take place between Ireland and Northern Ireland. As he will know, there are already some regulatory differences between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. There is a question in the future that I know has raised a concern as to whether there will be regulatory divergence between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. It is possible for us, and we will make unilateral commitments to Northern Ireland in relation to that issue of, because we're talking about a temporary period of no regulatory divergence. The checks and controls actually relate to the degree of regulatory divergence. So if there is no regulatory divergence, then obviously that has an impact on reducing the necessity for any checks and controls. And crucially, we also wanted to make sure, the EU wanted to say that they would determine whether a good that was developed or was produced in Birmingham could be sold in Belfast. We were very clear the EU could not determine that in the future. It will be the UK government that makes those determinations.
Helen Whately.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I stand here, I think hard about what this means for my constituents. Many who voted passionately to leave, but many others who are worried about the impact of leaving on their livelihoods. Can I thank my right honourable friend for all the work she is doing to reconcile those two positions in a workable Brexit. But as a Kent MP, I have a particular interest in avoiding delays at the border at Dover so we don't get gridlock in Kent. Could my right honourable friend say more about the progress made in the future relationship plans for our trade in goods?
I first of all say to my honourable friend that I thank her for the comment that she made and the recognition that, of course, by definition, in looking at these issues, there will be compromise. There are people who voted, obviously, on both sides of this argument when the Brexit vote came. I think the overwhelming view of the British people now is to see the government getting on and delivering Brexit for the British people. And she asked specifically about goods. We have expressly, within the outline political declaration, and we will be fleshing this out in the future framework, full of future framework document, put at a key element at the forefront of our thinking is the need to ensure that we can have that continuing good trading relationship with that good transfer, that seamless transfer of goods across borders.
Gareth Snell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I've been very clear that my constituents voted to leave the European Union, and the only way that we can do that smoothly is leaving with a deal. However, it is clear from the speeches that have been made in this House today that the Prime Minister's deal does not have a majority. She has also ruled out Article 50, and she has also said that she would not support a second referendum, and I do not believe a majority exists for that in this place anyway. But I hope, like me, the Prime Minister realises that no deal would be a catastrophe. So could I ask her to outline her contingency between this deal failing and preventing a no-deal Brexit on the 29th of March?
The decision about this deal will be one that will come before this House in the meaningful vote, and every member will have the opportunity to exercise their vote according to their conscience and according to the need to deliver for the British people, consideration of the impact that the decision they take will have on the futures of their constituents.
Simon Hoare.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hope my right honourable friend would agree with me that we would be extremely unwise to sacrifice the good on the altar of theological perfection. And if she does agree with me with that principled point, can she tell me if this is a good deal for the farmers and food producers, not just of my constituency of North Dorset, but for the country as a whole?
I will say to my honourable friend that I think it is important that in approaching this issue of the deal, and honourable members, when they come to the meaningful vote, should look at this in questions of the realities of the impact and the practicalities of the deal that we have will put before this House. He asked specifically about farmers in his constituency of North Dorset and elsewhere. I can reassure him that I think in two senses this delivers for them. First of all, of course, we will be able to come out of the Common Agricultural Policy and develop our own policy for agriculture that does meet the needs of farmers across the United Kingdom. And secondly, when we talk about the frictionless border, of course, people often talk about manufactured goods, but fresh produce going across those borders is also equally important.
Tonia Antoniazzi.
you, Mr Speaker. The local Schaeffler plant closing, 200 jobs, 800 Virgin Media job losses. Since the 2016 referendum, there have been more job losses than jobs created. It is increasingly obvious that my constituents and constituents in Wales are worse off. And shouldn't this government respect the future well-being of the people by asking for a people's vote?
I've answered the question in relation to the people's vote on a number of occasions, and I refer the Honourable Lady to the answer I have given previously on that. I have to say to her, the employment figures that we saw earlier this week showed that we now see employment at a record high in this country. In recent years, including since the referendum, jobs have been created in this country.
Lee Rowley. I have the huge amounts of respect for my honourable friend, and it gives me no happiness to say this, but nothing I've heard in the last 2 hours suggests that this is anything other than a bad deal. When will my honourable friend realise that in places like North East Derbyshire this is not the deal that they voted for, that they want, or that they will accept?
I say to my honourable friend, in response to his question, I believe, and obviously he will have an understanding of the reasons behind the vote for his individual constituents in North East Derbyshire. I think if we look across his constituency and others, some of the key issues that people wanted to see from leaving the European Union were an end to free movement. We will deliver an end to free movement. I think they wanted to see an end to the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice. We will deliver that as well. We will no longer be sending vast amounts of money to the European Union every year. We will come out of policies that have been of concern for a long time in this country, the Common Agricultural Policy and the Common Fisheries Policy, and we will be ensuring that, as I say, we have delivered on what I believe are the key elements of the vote that people took. While we do that, I think it's also right that we think of people's jobs in North East Derbyshire and elsewhere, and that's why I think it is important that we look for a good trading relationship with the European Union in the future, one that is based on a free trade area that enables manufacturing to continue to operate as it can do today.
Paula Sheriff.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Does the Prime Minister now accept that she inadvertently misled the nation during her now infamous Lancaster House speech, which appeared to offer a utopian vision of Brexit, possibly designed to appease both wings of her divided party, that simply cannot and never could be delivered?
Hear, hear. Well said. I have to say to the Honourable Lady that all the speeches I have made and the decisions that the government has taken are compatible with the Lancaster House speech. What the Lancaster House speech at its core set out was that in the new relationship with the European Union, we had to have a new balance of rights and obligations, and that is exactly what we are delivering.
David Duquette.
Constituents of my constituency, Banff-and-Buchan, and I welcome my right honourable friend's repeated and consistent commitment that we will be leaving the CFP. Of course, being out of the EU means we're out of the CFP in the same way that being in the EU, which is the policy of the Scottish Nationalist Party and others, means being in the CFP. You know it does. Will she also commit that unfettered access to UK waters by EU fishing vessels, out with our ability to control as an independent coastal state, will not be part of any future trade agreement with the EU?
Can I say to my honourable friend that we are very clear that we will be an independent coastal state. There have been attempts to link fisheries and link access to fishing waters to the trade aspect of this negotiation. We have been very clear that we will not accept that we will be an independent coastal state, so that it is the United Kingdom determining access to UK waters.
Adrian Bailey.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Uncertainty about our future trading relationships with the EU is undermining British business and having a chilling effect on our economic growth. There is absolutely nothing in this so-called deal which actually dispels or resolves the issues which are making for this. Will the Prime Minister recognise that instead of negotiating with the economic kamikaze tendency on our own party, she needs to reach out to this side of the House, build a consensus, or take the issue again to the public?
to the honourable gentleman that what the decision that was taken yesterday actually gives that certainty to business, which is why business have been welcoming that deal. So we hear Richard Walker from Iceland. It delivers a clear path ahead that business so desperately needs. We see from the FSB I quoted earlier, this brings with it some certainty that our small businesses have craved. And there are other quotes from business. Business have welcomed the fact that we have recognised the needs of manufacturing industry in putting forward our proposals for the future relationship.
Simon Clarke.
Mr. Speaker, I commend the Prime Minister for what she has said to members opposite, and indeed a handful on our own side, who have called for a politician's vote on the issue of a second referendum. It simply would not be appropriate at this time. However, it must be said that her words that no deal is better than a bad deal are the words which govern my position today. I cannot support that deal. Does she appreciate that for many of us she has placed us in a simply impossible position where our loyalty to her and to our party is set against our loyalty to our constituents?
Can I say to the honourable gentleman, I fully recognise that the issue that we are dealing with raises some difficult decisions for individual members of this House. And the choices before members of this House are not easy, and I absolutely recognise that. And as I said, obviously, we will, when the final deal is brought back to this House, individual members will want to look at the details of that and consider, obviously, at the forefront, the interests of their constituents, the interests of this country as a whole. As I say, I recognise that this is not an easy decision for people to take. I believe that what we have negotiated is in the best interests of our country overall. We will be filling out more details of that before the matter comes before the House, and I hope members of the House will be able to look at that fuller detail and consider the various issues that they have to do so when they do that. But that in no way says that this will be an easy choice, and I fully recognise that.
Karen Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I voted Remain, but I represent a Leave constituency. I try really hard to represent everybody in Lincoln, not just the ones that shout the loudest. And I truly get an evenly split mailbox on this. I genuinely do. But I feel that this deal doesn't meet the aspirations and hopes of either side. It fails to protect jobs and the economy, and it creates a border down the Irish Sea. I would just say, if the Prime Minister will not listen to the Labour benches, will she not look at the faces of her own side and listen to their words and actually recognise this is a really bad deal?
To the honourable lady, this deal does not create a border down the Irish Sea, and this deal does take the future relationship, the outline political declaration, does take the interests of people's jobs into account in ensuring that we are negotiating a free trade area that will enable that good trade relationship to maintain with the European Union, which enables jobs to be not just maintained here in the UK, but created here in the UK.
Colin Clarke.
Speaker, is the Prime Minister clear how committed her loyal Scottish Conservative colleagues are to fishing and the Union?
Yes, I'm very clear, and indeed I would say to my honourable friend that I think he and our Scottish colleagues on the Conservative benches are an admirable contrast to the SNP, who are committed to neither fishing nor the Union.
Pete Wishart.
In the last few months, the Prime Minister has lost about a quarter of her cabinet, with more resignations to follow. As we've seen, her dead-on-arrival deal has been trashed by large sections of her backbench, and there are apparently letters winging their way to the honourable member for acting in sale. How many more indignities does the Prime Minister have to endure before she considers her position?
My position is that I have only one duty, and that is to deliver for the British people in the national interest.
Sir Oliver Heald.
Prime Minister will be aware that Hertfordshire is fortunate enough to have some major businesses in pharma, industries in the aerospace industry, working to the motor industry and so on. And they rely on having short times for the delivery of parts, just-in-time arrangements of that sort. They have integrated manufacture across Europe. Can the Prime Minister say if she feels that this agreement that she has put before us is going to be in the best interests of businesses like that and all the jobs in Hertfordshire which rely on them?
To my right honourable friend that I do believe that is the case. The future relationship in developing this future relationship with the European Union, we have indeed been considering as one of the key issues the need to ensure that trade across the borders, those just-in-time supply chains, can continue, because many jobs in constituencies around the country depend on that. So I can give my right honourable friend that assurance.
Sarah Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I visited a business in Croydon recently, and they are currently looking at warehouses just outside Amsterdam to move their business to, because they think that the direction of travel that this government has taken on Brexit will not work for them. Now, it's clear the Prime Minister is not going to get a vote in this House for this deal. She has ruled out extending Article 50, she's ruled out a general election, she's ruled out a people's vote, she's ruled out no deal as well. So can I ask the Prime Minister to categorically state, for the sake of the businesses in Croydon that are waiting right now to know what is going to happen in the future, what will she do if she loses the vote in Parliament?
Can I say to the Honourable Lady, if she is concerned about the businesses in Croydon, she should look carefully at the future relationship that we're developing with the European Union. We will fill out further details in relation to that, but that future relationship will deliver for the businesses in Croydon, will deliver on the issues that they have expressed concerns about, and will deliver in a way that ensures jobs can be kept in her constituency.
Mr. David Tredynick.
May I congratulate my right honourable friend on securing this deal and say that there's much in here that will please my constituents who voted very strongly to come out, including taking control of our borders and ending the free movement of labour. But may I say to the Prime Minister, I think her task in bringing this to the House for a meaningful vote will be much helped if she can flesh out the future relationship. This is absolutely critical. Right. And for those of her friends in Europe who are listening to this debate, if they can come to her aid and make it clear that they really do want a future relationship secured before the backstop comes into place, she has a real chance of carrying this House.
Thank my honourable friend for his comments, and I can give him the reassurance that I will be filling out the detail. We will be in the negotiations in the coming days, filling out the detail of that future framework, so that when the House comes to take that meaningful vote, they will be able to have a better understanding of the nature of the future relationship, which is one, as I say, that I believe will be able to deliver for industry across the country, for agriculture, for fishing, and indeed deliver on our security.
Vera Hobhouse.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does she accept that the fracturing of her own party demonstrate that the 17.5 million people who voted leave in 2016 were not united in what Brexit means for them, and therefore her claim of delivering on the majority vote of the British people is incorrect?
No, the majority vote of the British people was to leave the European Union, and that's what we will deliver.
Kevin Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I believe those who voted leave in Torbay did so because they want to see a global trading Britain, which would be epitomised by us joining the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, which includes some of our oldest allies, including the one which gifted that very dispatch box. Would she reassure me that the deal she is proposing will facilitate British membership of that agreement?
Friend, that reassurance. We specifically looked, when we were looking at this proposal, as to whether it would be possible to join the CPTPP, and I can give him the assurance that it would, and not only that it would be possible for us to join it, but also that there are members of the CPTPP who are keen for us to join it, such as Japan and Australia.
Vernon Coker.
Mr. Speaker, given the fact that it's obviously clear from the contributions today and the questions to the Prime Minister that there is not a parliamentary majority for the deal that she's bringing forward today, what is the plan that the Prime Minister has got? Just to wait for the vote to be lost and then panic? The British people deserve better than that. The Prime Minister has integrity. She has not got the confidence of this House to put this deal through. And there needs to be alternatives brought before us and the British people.
The right honourable gentleman. We will negotiate the remaining details of this deal, and there will be obviously the EU Council on the 25th of November. That will then be brought back to this House. Information will be made available to members of this House. It is at that point that members of this House will determine whether they wish to support the deal.
Mike Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Which part of the financial settlement under the proposed withdrawal agreement would be payable during the implementation period and during any backstop?
The financial settlement has a trajectory in terms of payment, some of which would be, in fact, beyond the periods that my honourable friend has referred to. There is no specific financial obligation in relation to the backstop, should that backstop come into play.
Patrick Grady.
The Prime Minister is so confident of the merits of this deal. Is she not slightly concerned that when she goes to Europe, other member states will look at it enviously and want to leave the European Union on similar terms? Or does it not, in fact, give lie to the truth that the best possible relationship, by definition, with the European Union is the one that my constituents, the people across Scotland, for, which is to remain in the European Union?
I'm tempted to refer the honourable gentleman to answers I gave earlier on this question. We had a vote. The overall vote was that we should leave the European Union, and that's what we will deliver.
Nigel Huddleston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On all important political decisions, not only do I listen to my constituents and the businesses that employ my constituents, but I also ask myself the question, is this in the long-term interests of my children? I have a great deal of respect for the Prime Minister. She's a dedicated public servant. So can I ask her with all sincerity, given all the viable options available, is this deal in the best interests of my children?
Can I say to my honourable friend that I genuinely believe this deal is in the national interest, and that means it is in the best interests of people up and down the United Kingdom, of whatever age they are, including those who are children today. What I want to do is to ensure that as we leave the European Union, we are able to build that brighter future, both with a good trade relationship with the EU, our nearest neighbours, but also developing those trade relationships around the rest of the world. It is that that has been at the forefront of our thinking, and I believe that is in the interests of his children and others for their future.
Fangham Debonair.
Mr. Speaker, this is a very divided country, and with the rise of the far right, we should be reaching out across differences, not narrowing down and only looking at our own sides. I've looked out and listened to people who voted leave, despite the fact I represent a very Remain constituency, but the Prime Minister has not extended the same courtesy to my constituents and the rest of the 48%. So I have to ask the Prime Minister, what has she got against listening to people who voted Remain?
To the honourable lady, my own constituency voted Remain, as it happens, and we have been listening to people across the country. We've been listening to businesses, we've been listening to individuals. And I believe that the deal that we have negotiated with the European Union, with the final details yet to be completed, is one that does deliver, because I believe that, and actually I think most people in this country today want the government to deliver Brexit, to get on with it, and to ensure that we do so in a way that protects jobs and livelihoods across our country.
Gavin Newlands.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Both the Scottish Secretary and Ruth Davidson said they couldn't possibly support, indeed could resign over any deal that put the integrity of the UK at risk, a reason now cited in various ministerial resignations. I, of course, have every confidence in their own personal integrity and take them at their word. Can the Prime Minister confirm, has she received any correspondence confirming their resignations or intentions to do so?
Sorry. I'm sorry, I thought the honourable gentleman was asking me effectively whether any members of the Cabinet or Ministers had resigned, and I think he will see from the public information that there have been some.
Faisal Rashid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After 2 years of insecurity and uncertainty, the Prime Minister is proposing an outline deal which is a real backwards step from the position the UK is now. Councils up and down the country, like mine in Warrington, are urging MPs to ask from a people's vote so they have a say on whether to be worse off. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that it is in the national interest now to go back to the people of this country, and also, if Parliament vote down this deal, will she give British people a voice?
to the honourable gentleman. We gave the British people a voice. We gave them the opportunity to choose between leaving and remaining in the European Union. They chose to leave, and that's what we'll deliver.
Mr. Richard Bacon.
Mr. Speaker, when we become an independent coastal state again, which I very much look forward to, of course our fishing waters will need protecting. Will the Prime Minister consider commissioning a new fleet of very fast naval vessels to chase down and capture any vessels that come into our waters to fish uninvited, thus protecting fishing and our rights to fishing in Scotland and right down the east coast to East Anglia, including my neighbour's constituency of Lowestoft?
I say to my honourable friend, I'm not sure whether his question was more intended to be a support for the fishing industry or a bid for the Ministry of Defence for the comprehensive spending review. We will be ensuring that we can operate as an independent coastal state and protect the interests of our fishing industry.
Bambos Charalambos.
Many people think that this is a bad deal, has little support in the House and has got very little chance of passing. So can I ask the Prime Minister to tell me what safeguards there are for UK and EU citizens in the event of a no-deal Brexit?
Being very clear that in the event of a no-deal Brexit, European Union citizens who are living here in the United Kingdom will have their rights protected.
Thanks. Thank you. Stuart Malcolm MacDonald.
When is the next general election?
2022.
Tanmanjeet Singh Desi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This government's fudged, botched Brexit deal is the worst of both worlds for both Leave and Remain. Does the Prime Minister not agree that whilst we have given the government 2 years to make a complete dog's breakfast of Brexit negotiations and still not be in a position to command a majority in this House, it is now high time to end this charade, to waste no further time, to have a meaningful vote and for us to take back control in this House?
There will be a meaningful vote. There will be a meaningful vote on the final deal as it is agreed with the European Union.
Jim Shannon.
Speaker, I stand here, Mr. Speaker, with a heavy heart and great sadness. And does the Prime Minister, or will the Prime Minister recollect the biblical story of Jacob and Esau, where Esau sold his birthright for a bowl of pottage? Does the Prime Minister see the similarity that she is attempting to see my children and grandchildren's birthright and constituents' right to be British and for a despicable and shoddy deal? As Rudyard Kipling said, before our emperor's eyes, the traitor claims his price, what needed for their lives, we are the sacrifice. Prime Minister, we will not be your sacrifice and will not agree to give the backstop control to the EU or to the Republic of Ireland over Northern Ireland. Never.
Honourable gentleman, I very much respect the honourable gentleman, and I respect the concerns that he has shown in relation to this issue of the backstop. We are not, while respecting him, I do reject the description that he has given of what is being done in relation to this deal. As I've said earlier, it is clear that it is necessary to have a withdrawal agreement, and in that withdrawal agreement to have this insurance policy. There are various ways in which that insurance policy can be exercised, and it is my certainly firm hope and my intent in everything that we work and do to ensure that the backstop does not need to be put into practice.
Chris Stevens.
The Prime Minister will be aware there are 27 million UK citizens with who hold a European health insurance card. So can I ask, and after December 2020, what will be the status of the European health insurance card as it applies to UK citizens, or will it be redundant after January 2021?
Can I say to the honourable gentleman, I will perhaps write to him with specifics on the health card, because that is an issue that has been negotiated in relation to the period to December 2020. I think the question of any reciprocal rights in relation to healthcare is a matter that is still to be negotiated for the future relationship, but I will write to him with more detail.
Chris Elmore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister has been asked time and time again this question, but I'll try again. She has heard across the House there is no support for her deal. She will not call a general election. She won't support a people's vote. She won't extend Article 50. And her threat is her deal or no deal. So can she confirm that if the House doesn't support her deal, she will push us off the no-deal cliff edge?
As I have said in response to others, when the House comes to look at this deal, it will be for every member of this House to consider not only the duty to ensure that we deliver on the vote of the British people, but also to consider the long-term interests of their constituents.
Kirsty Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister hasn't explained what in the national interest actually means. So can she tell us, compared to remaining in the EU, how many extra jobs she believes will be created, how much faster our GDP will grow, and how much better off will each family be?
Can I say to the Honourable Lady, just to give her an example of one of the issues that she raised, if she looked at the report that the OBR produced at the time of the budget, well understanding that we were leaving the European Union, they said that over the next few years 800,000 more jobs will be created.
Ian C. Lucas.
Mr. Speaker, on Northern Ireland, in the protocol, paragraph 4 of the agreement contains the following extraordinary statement: the parties should use their best endeavours to seek to facilitate trade between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. What assurance does that give to this House about the integrity of the United Kingdom?
Been working and are very clear in the issues that we have developed that there will continue to be that trade between Northern Ireland and Great Britain. I responded a little earlier to another honourable member of the House in relation to the impact of any regulatory requirements that there are as a result of the UK EU-wide customs territory. I also was clear about the changes that we have brought about in terms of approvals, for example, for the ability of companies to be able to sell and to have that business across between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. It was one of the commitments we gave in December, and it's a commitment that continues.
Clive Lewis.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sure the irony has not been missed on the Prime Minister that it's exactly 80 years ago that another Conservative Prime Minister came back from Europe waving a piece of paper and claiming success. I believe the exact words were "peace in our time," and it was Neville Chamberlain. Given that there is no peace on the benches opposite, given that you do not command the support of this House, can the Prime Minister tell us what the options are? A general election or a people's vote or a hard Brexit cliff edge?
The honourable gentleman will have heard the answer that I have given to other members of this House. When the deal is brought back from the European Council to this House, it will be up to individual members of this Parliament, of this House, to determine whether they believe that is a deal that they can support in the interests of their constituents and in the national interest or not.
Matt Weston.
Speaker, following this debate, the odds are that the government will be forced into a U-turn on this other FOBT, namely the fudge over Brexit terms. Given the meaningful vote is likely to fail, would it not now be prudent for the Prime Minister to ask the EU for an extension to Article 50 and offer the public a second vote?
Gentlemen, to answers I've given earlier to both of those questions.
Albert Owen.
Prime Minister, we all understand the importance of the Belfast Agreement. But these special arrangements for one part of the United Kingdom, that is Northern Ireland, will have an impact on the rest of the United Kingdom, including seaports on the western seaboard, because it will create a de facto line across the Irish Sea. So can I ask her, because she has managed one thing today, Mr. Speaker, and that's to unite the DUP, my party, and sections of her own party on this issue. So can I ask her to go back to Brussels? This isn't a final agreement. Look at this again. Let's have fairness and unity in the United Kingdom.
Can I say, I will say to the honourable gentleman that I think he's referring to the circumstances of if the backstop was operated. Of course, the border issues between the way the border would operate between Northern Ireland and Ireland would be different from the way the border would operate between Great Britain and the rest of the European Union. That's exactly one of the issues that will be considered should they be at the point of having to determine whether the best option was the backstop or indeed the implementation period. Because if it was an extension of the implementation period, then of course the frictionless border with the rest of the EU would continue as it is today.
Bill Esterson.
The Prime Minister says that it is a choice between her botched option
or no deal. It's crystal clear to everyone there is no support in this House, majority support in this House, for either of those options, and it's also clear that the half-hearted preparation for no deal means she knows that's not a realistic choice. So when is she going to admit that she needs to allow Parliament to come up with alternatives, and she better do this sooner rather than later?
First of all, I say to the honourable gentleman that we are making clear preparations for no deal. We have continued to make those preparations. We stepped those preparations up this summer. Parliament will have an opportunity to vote on the deal in the meaningful vote.
Paul Farrelly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Right at the outset today, the Right Honourable Learned Member for Rushcliffe quite rightly stressed the importance of freedom of movement of goods. But services are also a vital part of our economy, at which we are very good. So could the Prime Minister explain what benefits her approach give to the services sector that it doesn't already enjoy? And importantly, what influence would it give in the future, after transition, on the future development of the single market, including the digital single market?
As the honourable gentleman will know, once we leave the European Union, we will not be participating in decisions that the European Union takes in relation to its particular market. I think it is important, because services are so important to the UK economy, that the flexibility that is set out in the outline political declaration is available to services, financial services and others. This is a key area for the United Kingdom, and it's a key area in which I expect that we will be able to develop good partnerships and good relationships, not just with the European Union, but with other parts of the world as well, to the interests of his constituents and others across this country.
Peter Grant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister finally admitted last night that there are not 2 but 3 possible outcomes from where we stand just now. Yet she still insists that Parliament will only have allowed a binary choice between 2 of them, will be denied the right to vote on the only one of the 3 options that has any chance of commanding majority support, will be denied the right to vote on the one that the majority of MPs now believe is in the best interests of our constituents. And by what stretch of imagination does that constitute a meaningful vote, and in what parallel universe can it be described as returning control to Parliament?
The meaningful vote will be an amendable motion, but as I have said previously, I think if you went and asked most members of the public, if the government brings a deal back from Brussels, what do you expect Parliament to vote on? I think they would expect Parliament to be able to have a vote on that deal.
Clive Efford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister's got to accept responsibility for the position she's put herself in. It was she who thought it was a good idea to make the member for Uxbridge her Foreign Secretary. She's appointed 2 arch-Brexiters as the Brexit secretaries. These people were always going to lay her low and desert her. So she's now left with no majority for her position in the House. So surely she has to hold a vote in this House to get an indicative position of the House of Commons on this deal before she goes to a summit at the end of this month, so she can honestly represent the views of this House on the deal that she has negotiated.
The House will be able to take a vote on the final deal that is negotiated with the European Council. That is what we have committed to this House, and that is what will happen.
Neil Gray.
Speaker, the people of Scotland voted by a wide margin to remain within the EU, and ever since that point the democratic wishes of the people of Scotland have been disrespected, as have the wishes of the democratically elected Scottish Parliament and the Scottish Government, who have put forward compromise positions to the government, UK Government on Brexit. But can she confirm that yesterday the disrespect to the people of Scotland was extended threefold? Firstly, in terms of providing a differential deal to Northern Ireland. Secondly, in terms of providing briefings to the Government of Gibraltar before the Scottish Government. And thirdly, as was pointed out on Radio Scotland this morning by the honourable member from West Aberdeenshire and Kincardine, that the Conservative members from Scotland were briefed on the text of the withdrawal agreement before the Scottish Government. Is that the case?
Say to the honourable gentleman that he talks about respecting the positions that have been taken. Throughout this, we have respected the fact that we are negotiating on behalf of the whole of the United Kingdom and in the interests of the whole of the United Kingdom. And we have continued to do that and will continue to do that. And Scotland, of course, is part of the United Kingdom.
Martin Whitfield.
Grateful, Mr. Speaker, and also to your indulgence earlier today. I'd like to ask the Prime Minister, why is no Brexit a risk to the United Kingdom and my constituency of East Lothian?
I have to say, the people of this country voted to leave the European Union. I believe it is in their interests and the duty of this Parliament to deliver it. What I said was a risk of no Brexit at all taking place, and as a number of members across this House from those opposition benches have said that they would prefer to keep us in the European Union. I disagree. The British people voted to leave, and we will leave.
Alex Norris.
Speaker, my primary concern through this process has been jobs in my community, and nobody knows more about negotiating for jobs than our nation's trade unions that represent millions and millions of working people. Since this deal's been struck, has the Prime Minister spoken to our unions or their representatives, and if not, what day will she do so?
Can I assure the honourable gentleman that the interests of trade unions and the interests of businesses have been taken into account in the work that has been done. There has been interaction with trade unions. There is from my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy.
Annalisa Dodds.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to ask a very specific question, and I would like a specific answer. The statement of intent for the EU settlement scheme said those applying will not be required to show that they meet all the requirements of current free movement rules. That's been contradicted by the latest set of immigration regulations. From my reading, this agreement is ambiguous on that point. So can she indicate whether, as she promised, it will be possible for people to get settled status where they can prove they've been resident and can pass a criminality check, but they might not be able, through no fault of their own, to prove that they've been exercising their EEA treaty rights?
I think I heard the honourable lady say that the regulations were ambiguous, and therefore, but she claimed that ambiguity necessarily contradicted what had been said previously. In the interests of making sure that the honourable lady gets as accurate a reply as possible, I will write to her on this matter.
Darren Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are a number of simple truths amongst the political noise. Firstly, Brexit is bad for Britain. Secondly, that the Prime Minister's proposal has no majority in this House. And thirdly, that on the future relationship, the thing that all of my constituents wish to know about, regardless of their view on Brexit, is a 7-page wish list and nothing else. The Prime Minister said today that she'll bring further details to the House, but can she confirm how long we will have, as a House and Select Committees, and as constituency MPs in conversation with our constituents, to fully understand the consequences of her future proposal between the UK and the EU?
We will be ensuring that Parliament, before it takes the meaningful vote, is able to see both the future framework as it is developed in greater detail than it is at the moment in the outline political declaration, together with, as I've indicated earlier, the various forms of analysis that the government has committed to.
Paul Sweeney.
Given that her own Scottish Tory MPs no longer have confidence in her Secretary of State for Scotland, who has been trampled over on fisheries and on the Irish backstop and couldn't even turn up today, how can the Prime Minister seriously suggest that this deal offers anything other than undermining the integrity of the United Kingdom?
The integrity, and his portrayal of the position of the Secretary of State for Scotland is completely wrong. The Secretary of State for Scotland is doing an excellent job, together with my Conservative colleagues, Scottish Conservative colleagues on these benches, in defending the interests of Scotland, and in doing so in a rather better way than the SNP.
Luke Graham.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Just to come back on the honourable gentleman's comment there, to be very clear, the Secretary of State hasn't had a red line crossed. My honourable friend, and I hope she will affirm again, that we will negotiate fishing as an independent coastal state in 2020. And furthermore, Scotland has been respected, and it is being respected by consulting Scottish MPs in this House, as is appropriate.
Hear, hear.
Thank you. I thank my honourable friend for pointing that out, and I'm clear to confirm the commitments I gave earlier about the position of the United Kingdom as an independent coastal state.
Brendan O'Hara.
Mr. Speaker, given the absence of the lesser spotted Secretary of State for Scotland in the last 48 hours, could the Prime Minister take this opportunity to explain to those living in my already economically fragile Argyll and Bute constituency
exactly why her deal puts them at a competitive disadvantage to their very close neighbours in Northern Ireland.
Here, here.
The Scottish SNP members have, on a number of occasions now, referred to the issue of Northern Ireland in relation to Scotland and this deal. Northern Ireland has a particular set of circumstances that do not... Oh, the honourable gentleman says, oh, and we do not. No, you do not.
No, this is really the height of discourtesy. The Prime Minister is answering the question and must be heard. The question's just been asked, the Prime Minister's answering it, and the honourable gentleman is jabbering away from a sedentary position to no obvious benefit or purpose. The Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think the honourable gentleman was raising a sort of suggestion that actually Scotland was in the same position as Northern Ireland. Of course it's not. It doesn't have a land border with a country that's going to be within the European Union.
Ruth Cadbury.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This deal is far worse for our young people than the deal they currently have with our membership of the EU. This deal has no guarantees on Erasmus, on funding for EU students, on their travel and work rights in Europe, on EU research funding worth €100 billion. When the future of millions of young people are at stake, doesn't she agree that it's time to let them vote for their future with a people's vote, particularly for those young people who didn't get a vote last time because they weren't old enough?
There are references in what we have agreed in relation to some of the matters that she has set forward. But this is a deal which is about the future of this country. It is about... Oh, she's holding up the withdrawal agreement. The withdrawal agreement actually is about our withdrawal from the European Union. It is not about our future relationship. The matters she referred to are about our future relationship.
Ian Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the Prime Minister look at my constituents in the eye and guarantee that this withdrawal agreement will put them in a better position than which they currently enjoy as a member of the European Union, and promise to them that not one of my constituents will be a penny worse off as a result of this agreement?
What is going to ensure the future of the honourable gentleman's constituents and those of members and right honourable members across this House is not the withdrawal agreement, but the future relationship that we deliver with the European Union. That's precisely why we have put the element of the economic partnership as such an important part of that future relationship.
Stuart C. MacDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister is yet to answer a simple but very important question. If her deal is rejected, what will her government do next?
Resign.
As I said, in fact said quite a lot earlier in answer to a question, there is the process that will happen were that to happen is set out quite clearly for this House. But the question is, how will individual members of this House approach this decision when they come to make it, in the interests of the country and in the interests of their constituents? And they will need to have at the forefront of their minds the duty to deliver on the vote of the British people to leave the European Union, and the overall national interest of our country and the interests of their constituents.
Anna McMorrin.
Mr. Speaker, the world is looking on us with horror and sympathy. My constituents in Cardiff North, people up and down Wales and across the UK, worry how to make ends meet. They know now that Brexit is bad for Britain. Can the Prime Minister tell my constituents exactly how this deal will make them better off than they are now?
The Honourable Lady says that she is concerned. I've set out before why I think this deal and the future partnership we can have with the European Union and trade deals around the rest of the world can benefit of our economy, benefit jobs, benefit the Honourable Lady's constituents. She says her constituents worry about how to make ends meet. It's precisely why this government is a government that has continued to increase the national living wage, that has put through tax cuts for millions of people in this country.
Catherine West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could the Prime Minister enlighten the House as to why the member for Sale and Antrim may be meeting with the Chief Whip at this moment?
But that nothing to do with the statement. There's nothing to do with the statement. Dr. Paul Williams.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the Prime Minister for staying to answer everyone's questions. The Prime Minister says that we risk no Brexit at all. Our NHS relies on EU workers and depends on EU research and medicines collaboration. How is this deal better for the NHS than no Brexit?
I say to the honourable gentleman, first of all, that the British people voted to leave the European Union, and we have a duty to deliver on leaving the European Union. If he is concerned about the future of the National Health Service, then I hope he supports the significant decision that this government has taken to make the biggest injection of funding into our National Health Service in its history, with our multi-year funding programme, over £80 billion more going into the National Health Service, and the 10-year plan that ensures the sustainability of our NHS into the future.
Prime Minister, thank you. Colleagues, thank you. Yes, I'll take the honourable gentleman's point of order. It's material to what we've been discussing, but I do then wish to proceed, thank you, to the business statement. Point of order, Mr Neil Gray.
Mr. Speaker, on a point of order, it was suggested this morning on Radio Scotland by the honourable member from West Aberdeenshire and Kincardine, and later confirmed, apparently, by the member from Ochil and South Perthshire, that the Conservative members of this House from Scotland were given advance sight of the withdrawal agreement before other party leaders in this House and before the democratically elected devolved administrations. Now, I know my constituents in Airdrie and Shotts would see that as being disorderly and disrespectful, but I wonder, Mr. Speaker, whether you could confirm, in terms of the rules of this House, whether that was disorderly and disrespectful.
Hear. Certainly nothing to do with the rules of the House. I mean, I'm sorry to disappoint the honourable gentleman if he thinks that it is, but it's nothing to do with the rules of the House. There are judgments to be made in this matter, and opinions will differ as to the wisdom of particular courses of action, but there's been no breach of order. I absolutely recognise the irritation or dissatisfaction of the honourable gentleman, but that is distinct from any question of procedural impropriety. Point of order, Mr Luke Graham.
Just in response to the point of order that was just made, I just want to clarify. Yeah.
Here, he can raise a point of order. If he just wants to have a tit for tat with another honourable member, that is not a proper use of a point of order. He wanted a tit for tat. No. Oh, he wants a ruling. Very good. Point of order, Mr Luke Graham.
Mr. Speaker, I would look for your ruling and advice and clarification on how to make sure the record is read correctly in relation to a point that was made in the House earlier today regarding the point that was made by members on this side of the House, by Scottish Conservatives, in looking at government text before it had been released to other MPs. In the previous statement, I had mentioned about my honourable friend, the Prime Minister, engaging Scottish MPs, but as Hansard, I'm sure, will reflect, it was about in relation to this statement this morning and not any other preview of other text. How can I clarify this, Mr. Speaker?
Clarification, I advise the honourable gentleman, in terms that brook of no contradiction or misunderstanding, is contained with within the terms of his own inquiry. Because, as the honourable gentleman has just emphasised, statements were made earlier during the course of exchanges. Because those statements were made, they will be recorded in the official report. And therefore, all people need to do is to study the official report, including to establish what was and what was not said by the honourable gentleman. I hope that that is helpful to him, and he will now go about his business with an additional glint in his eye and spring in his step for the rest of the day. Very good. If there are no further points of order, we come now to the business statement. The Leader of the House, Andrea Leadsom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to announce that the business for next week will be on Monday the 19th of November, consideration in Committee of the Finance No. 3 Bill, Day 1. Tuesday the 20th of November, continuation of consideration in Committee of the Finance No. 3 Bill, Day 2. Wednesday the 21st of November, second reading of the Fisheries Bill. Thursday, the 22nd of November, a general debate on the Armed Forces Covenant. Friday, the 23rd of November, private members' bills. The provisional business for the week commencing the 26th of November will include, on Monday the 26th of November, second reading of the Courts and Tribunals, Judiciary and Functions of Staff Bill, Lords. Mr. Speaker, the House is rightly focused on the important decisions that lie ahead of us with regard to leaving the EU. But we also continue to fulfil the many other vital aspects of our parliamentary roles. So I was delighted with you, Mr. Speaker, to welcome the Youth Parliament to the Chamber last week and to hear of the significant issues that they wanted to debate, such as mental health and serious violence. Also last week, we had the first ever Women MPs of the World Conference in this chamber, demonstrating our commitment to global outreach and promoting our democratic values. And then this week, Mr. Speaker, is Parliament Week, a chance for hundreds of schools and civic organisations to take part in and to promote democratic engagement. Finally, along with the Prime Minister, yourself and others, the Leader of the Lords and I look forward to presenting a humble address to His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales later today on the event of his 70th birthday. Thank you.
Thank you. Valerie Vaz.
This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters Live service.